Chapter 21:13, Black Dragon King. Old Bone Demon. Xiao Gu said with enthusiasm. He always enjoyed finding a new person to mimic. There was astonishing brilliance in the man's eyes as he swept his gaze over Xiao Gu again and again. In the end, he sighed in sadness, saying, "So you've also died." "So you've also died," Xiao Gu said with a sigh. This was indeed correct. The eternal celestial king had indeed died several epochs ago. However, Ling Han and the others all knew that Xiao Gu was simply mimicking the man in green, so they couldn't help but find this slightly amusing. One of them was the remnant intent of a celestial tool, while one of them was simply a celestial king bone. When they sighed with emotion, Ling Han and the others couldn't help but find it slightly strange. The man in green squinted as he counted with his fingers. After a moment, he said, "So it's already been this long." This was a dead person talking about how long he had already been dead. This was becoming stranger and stranger. "Senior, you've already been dead for so long, so why don't you give this bell to me?" Ling Han said. Upon hearing this, Lu Hairong's hair instantly stood on ends. She was given a huge fright. This was a ninth heaven celestial king. Even though he had already been dead for countless years, his might still existed. Thus, they had to treat him with utmost respect. Yet, Ling Han actually dared to ask for his celestial tool. He was truly courageous. He was also fairly shameless. The man in green faltered for a moment before roaring with laughter. "I died countless years ago, and this wisp of aura is only a remnant intent that hasn't dissipated yet. Now that I've awoken, this aura will dissipate in at most a dozen days. Fine, I'll bestow this bell of time upon you." Fuck. He truly gave it away. Lu Hairong couldn't help but feel slightly regretful. If she had known this, she would have definitely asked first. Even though the bell of time was damaged, it was still a celestial tool that had been forged by a ninth heaven celestial king. No matter what, it still possessed the might of seventh heaven or eighth heaven celestial kings. "Young girl, you don't possess such fortune, so there's no need to feel regret," the man in green said in an indifferent voice. It was as if he knew what Lu Hairong was thinking. Lu Hairong couldn't help but feel astounded. She was a fourth heaven celestial king. Her emotions didn't show on her face, yet before this man, she couldn't hide them at all. His eyes were far too sharp. Huh. This young girl. A look of realization spread across the man's face as he gazed at Hun Yo, and he said, "You're the seventh disciple of Brother Rock, correct? However, the symbol on your divine sense is damaged, and it seems neither human nor matter. You're not the same person as before." As expected of a ninth heaven celestial king. Nothing could escape his observation. This was even though he was only a remnant intent. "Senior, you sacrificed yourself while resisting the force of darkness, yet right now, the people from the force of darkness are still trying to extract the source power of heaven and earth from this continent. They want to damage the defenses of this heaven and earth. Senior, please help us," Ling Han said with a bow. They weren't sure about the Black Dragon King's cultivation, so what would they do if he were above the fourth heaven? If that were the case, Lu Hairong would simply be seeking death. The man in green was the eternal celestial king's remnant intent, so they might as well treat him as the eternal celestial king. Anger spread across his face, and he said, "These devils from the outside realm. They still haven't given up yet." Boom! Divine light exploded from his body, illuminating the entire void. "Farewell, senior," Lu Hairong said with a bow. This was genuinely going to be the eternal celestial king's final battle. Heaven and earth had their regulations, and when one died, their Tao would also vanish. This wisp of divine sense had only remained for several epochs thanks to the existence of the celestial tool. Once it unleashed its might, however, it would exhaust its power and vanish once and for all. "Farewell, senior." Ling Han and the others also bowed respectfully. The celestial kings who had battled to death here were all deserving of their utmost respect. They were worthy of being remembered forever. Farewell, senior. Xiao Gu said too. He mimicked what he saw. The eternal celestial king was rendered speechless. While alive, he and Xiao Gu had shared the same status. Before they had achieved Dao, Xiao Gu had even enjoyed a higher status than him. Now, however, Xiao Gu was actually referring to him as senior. This naturally made him feel extremely exasperated. However, he wasn't in the mood to reminisce with Xiao Gu right now. His final flames had already started to burn. Whoosh! A figure suddenly dashed over, bringing with them boundless darkness. This was a woman who looked to be around 30 years old. Her figure was shapely, and her skin was smooth and jade-like. Her hair was tied into a bun, and as she looked over them, her gaze was as sharp as could be. So it's just a few insects, she said with a sneer. A black dragon rose behind her, brandishing its 4 claws and radiating with a terrifying aura. Is this the Black Dragon King? There was no brilliant light around her, so it was impossible to determine her cultivation level. Bishi, the eternal celestial king, said with astonishment. You actually didn't die. Moreover, you've defected to darkness. Bishi. Ling Han and the others were astounded upon hearing this. The first dragon in the world was called the Origin Dragon, and the Origin Dragon had given birth to 9 children. The 7th was none other than Bishi. However, they hadn't imagined that Bishi was actually a female. The Black Dragon King started to laugh in a wanton manner. This wasn't an arrogant laugh, and it was instead a crazed laugh. She glared at the eternal celestial king with a baleful expression as she said, When I was captured by Lord Mo Fu back then, which of you came to rescue me? To say nothing of you people, even my father abandoned me as if I were nothing. That being the case, why do I need to sacrifice myself for this world? I'm going to annihilate this world with my own hands. The eternal celestial king was extremely resolute, and he immediately charged forward upon hearing this. Since that's the case, I have nothing else to say to you. He didn't utter any nonsense about dragging her back onto their side. First of all, her hate was far too deep-rooted, so she couldn't be persuaded at all. Second of all, he didn't have the time to do so. Pung! The Black Dragon King launched a punch, which transformed into a colossal dragon claw as it bore down on the eternal celestial king. A black lotus blossomed above the head of the dragon behind her, and it radiated with an extremely sinister aura. 16th Lotus. Ling Han knew that the 9th lotus of this force corresponded to the ascending origin tier. That being the case, what did the 16th lotus correspond to? Pung! The attacks of the eternal celestial king and the Black Dragon King collided, causing both of them to shudder and retreat thousands of kilometers. However, with a single stride, they immediately charged forward and collided again, continuing their intense battle. Pung, pung, pung. The sound of their collisions was like torrential rain, and to everyone's shock, the Black Dragon King wasn't being suppressed at all. If you were still in your strongest state, I would indeed be no match for you. However, you're merely a remnant divine sense at this moment, and you can only unleash the power of an 8th heaven celestial king. Even though I'm only a 7th heaven celestial king, I possess the magnificent power bestowed upon me by Lord Mo Fu. Because of this, I'm no weaker than you, the Black Dragon King said with pride. My physique is present, and my divine sense is also intact, meaning that I can battle like this forever. However, what about you? You're at the end of your journey, and your power might vanish at any moment. The eternal celestial king didn't reply. Instead, he simply attacked with his full might. With a roar, a semi-transparent blade appeared in his hands. This blade shone with the radiance of time. He had formed this blade using the regulations of time. If one were struck, their body would be torn apart by the power of time. Some parts would be tossed 700 years into the past, while some parts might be thrown 100,000 years into the past. Some parts might even be sent back to 3 epochs ago. His opponent wasn't wrong. He indeed didn't have long. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon King could still battle forever. This was an inherently unfair battle. Ling Han's heart thumped against his chest. He hadn't imagined that the force of darkness would view this place with such great importance. They had deployed a 16th Lotus Elite, one whose cultivation level could rival 7th Heaven Celestial Kings and whose battle prowess could rival 8th Heaven Celestial Kings. It was commonly said that advancing to each level in the Celestial King tier was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Just what kind of power had Lord Imo Fu bestowed upon the Black Dragon King? She could actually overcome the difference of one heaven. Was the force of darkness truly so terrifying? Moreover, this would also entice many more people to descend into darkness. Chapter 21:14 Two Great Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. Yaya. Xiao Gu faltered for a moment before killing intent suddenly flooded his eyes. This was the power of darkness. This was his mortal enemy. Boom! Brilliant light radiated from his celestial king bone, and numerous symbols pulsated as they soared into the sky. In fact, even the chaotic winds above the continent were ripped apart by these symbols, unable to wreak chaos any longer. Die! Xiao Gu wore an expression of wild rage as he charged at the Black Dragon King. Huh! A surprised expression spread across the Black Dragon King's face. She hadn't paid any heed to Ling Han and the others before. After all, only the Eternal Celestial King was worthy of being considered as her opponent. Now that Xiao Gu was unleashing his rage, however, she was surprised to sense a powerful aura that she couldn't ignore. Haha! Old Bone Demon, you're finally going to unleash your might, the Eternal Celestial King said with a loud laugh. Yaya! Xiao Gu had no interest in mimicking others at this moment. He reached into his body, pulling out his Celestial King bone, and swinging it at the Black Dragon King. Old Bone Demon, the Black Dragon King murmured with a frown. Realization suddenly struck her, and she exclaimed, "You're the Bone Demon Celestial King." Apprehension spread across her face. The Bone Demon Celestial King enjoyed an equal standing with the Eternal Celestial King, but he had attained Tao even earlier. According to rumors, he was genuinely a bone that had gained awareness and intelligence. In the end, he had become a Celestial King. Thus, even though Xiao Gu was in an unintelligent state at this moment, as long as that Celestial King bone existed, no one would dare to underestimate him. Boom! Radiant light swirled around the Celestial King bone, and dozens of symbols started to light up one after another. Each symbol represented a true meaning of the Great Tao, and any one of them would be powerful enough to crush the sky. If this weren't the void, it was very likely that the heavens would have already been shattered. However, there existed the treasure of a heavenly venerate here, and its toughness was such that even the battle between Xiao Gu, the Black Dragon King, and the Eternal Celestial King couldn't damage it significantly. They could only shatter some of the boulders and destroy some of the cliffs. Otherwise, the casual attack of a Celestial King could easily obliterate such a valley, transforming it into a vast sea or even an expanse of void. The Black Dragon King roared with laughter, and said, "Let me spar with the two renowned Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings who could once rival the might of my father." A lotus with 16 petals bloomed between her brows, causing a dark aura to instantly radiate from her body. At this moment, she seemed wholly incompatible with this continent. "Dark destruction wave of the Black Dragon," she roared. She threw a punch, unleashing a burst of black light that transformed into a dark dragon head that snapped its jaws at Xiao Gu and the Eternal Celestial King. When the dragon head neared them, it suddenly widened its jaws and breathed out a black lotus. A boundless destructive aura instantly permeated the surroundings, and it was as if it were about to annihilate the entire world. The Eternal Celestial King and Xiao Gu both counterattacked with their full might. Pang, pang, pang. They both unleashed powerful celestial techniques to attack the Black Lotus. However, the Black Lotus was a terrifying existence, and it was as if it were an independent realm itself. It could neither be blocked nor destroyed. To their surprise, it continued to slowly crash down upon the Eternal Celestial King and Xiao Gu. Ha 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 ha. What Ninth Heaven Celestial King? Before the power of darkness, you're nothing but trash, the Black Dragon King said with laughter. She made a tapping motion at the Black Lotus, providing it with more energy. Bell of Time, come, the Eternal Celestial King roared. Wang! The large bronze bell in the valley immediately rang in reply, shooting into the sky, and flying toward the Eternal Celestial King. Song of the Ages, he cried. He then pointed at the Bell of Time. Ring! The ring of the bell reverberated through the void. Ring, ring, ring. The bell rang several more times, with some rings coming from the past, and some rings coming from the future. The Eternal Celestial King was a celestial king who had grasped the regulations of time. He had also cultivated this regulation to the paramount level, allowing him to alter the past and influence the future. Wang! A passageway was opened in the void, from which a man in azure flew out. This was another Eternal Celestial King. This was the Eternal Celestial King from another time. This was the Eternal Celestial King from 8 epochs ago before he had died. Using the Bell of Time as a medium, the current Eternal Celestial King had forcefully summoned himself from the past. This was an existence from the past, so it naturally couldn't stay in the present for long. However, that was a genuine 9th Heaven Celestial King. If he unleashed his full power, he could easily kill an 8th Heaven Celestial King within a few exchanges. Song of the Ages. Perhaps this celestial technique was passed down from the Eternal Celestial King? The Black Dragon King's expression instantly changed. She definitely couldn't allow this celestial king of the past to arrive. Otherwise, her fate could only be death. With a loud roar, scales instantly materialized over her body as she transformed into a dragon. She then violently swiped her claw at the passageway of time. Pung! A devastating power swept past, instantly obliterating the passageway of time. The Eternal Celestial King involuntarily frowned. He was far too weak at this moment, while his existence of the past was far too powerful. This resulted in his existence of the past being incredibly difficult and slow to summon. With the interference of the Black Dragon King, his passageway of time was more so directly destroyed. Is that all you've got? The Black Dragon King asked with a wanton laugh. Two once powerful 9th Heaven Celestial Kings were now painfully struggling before her. This caused her to feel extremely smug. What did it matter that they were once paramount and lofty? Right now, they could only suffer at her hands. I'll send you on your way. The Black Dragon King swooped through the air, stepping on a black lotus with 16 petals that was radiating with a violent destructive aura. At this moment, she was seemingly invincible. Yaya! Xiao Gu was furious, yet his power could only reach the 8th heaven. In fact, it was even slightly weaker. Thus, he naturally couldn't suppress the Black Dragon King. Meanwhile, the Eternal Celestial King was more so only a shell of his former self. His remnant divine sense was about to die out at any moment. Their defeat was already set in stone. Retreat! Lu Herong resolutely commanded. If they waited for the Black Dragon King to defeat the two Celestial Kings, their only fate would be death. How could they rival a 7th Heaven Celestial King? Moreover, this was a 7th Heaven Celestial King who possessed the battle prowess of an 8th Heaven Celestial King. You guys leave first. Ling Han shouted. After pondering for a moment, he immediately made a decision. He couldn't abandon those source powers of heaven and earth. First of all, they could allow him to become more powerful. Second of all, if those source powers fell into the hands of the force of darkness, they would draw another step closer to a full-scale invasion from the force of darkness. He had to give this a try. Anyhow, his confidence was derived from the existence of the Black Tower. We'll accompany you, the Empress immediately said. No, only if you leave can I go all out, Ling Han said. If the Black Tower unleashed its full power, he believed that its overwhelming might could rival the Black Dragon King or even suppress her. However, it might also attract the attention of those old monsters. Thus, he couldn't have any vulnerabilities around him. The Empress was a resolute person, and she immediately nodded in understanding. She dragged the screaming Hu Niu along with her as she leaped toward Lu Herong. Lu Herong didn't try to persuade Ling Han either. Since he was the successor of that mighty being, it was necessary for him to possess such courage. Moreover, he might also possess the ability to pluck fortune from the flames. Let's go. With a wave of her hand, she immediately grabbed the Empress and the others. She then immediately dashed into the distance. Stinky insects. The Black Dragon King sneered. Their actions didn't escape her gaze, and she immediately launched a casual attack, aiming to kill Lu Herong and the others. However, the Eternal Celestial King obstructed her in a timely manner, immediately blocking her attack. This instant was all Lu Herong needed to tear through the sky and escape into the void. With the chaotic winds raging through the void, even Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings wouldn't be able to discover Lu Herong and the others. Small tower, point me to the source powers of heaven and earth. Ling Han said with a resolute expression. He definitely had to obtain those source powers of heaven and earth. Even if he couldn't obtain them, he had to release them from this void. They definitely couldn't fall into the hands of the Black Dragon King. Follow my guidance, small tower. It was seemingly aware of the gravity of the situation as well, and it surprisingly didn't tease or argue with Ling Han. Instead, it immediately started to guide him toward the source powers of heaven and earth. Chapter 21:15, Two Source Powers of Heaven and Earth. Ling Han glanced at the intense battle before resolutely leaving. He couldn't help Xiao Gu and the Eternal Celestial King at all. However, if he could find the source powers of heaven and earth and obtain or release them, he could achieve his goal of this trip. As for the Black Dragon King, she was merely another elite. Regardless of how powerful one was, if they weren't a heavenly venerate, their influence on the world was only limited. This was the case even though she was a seventh heaven celestial king. Meanwhile, the Black Dragon King more so wouldn't pay any heed to Ling Han. Anyhow, Lu Herong had already escaped, so she couldn't be bothered paying any more attention to Ling Han. Instead, she would focus her full attention on suppressing Xiao Gu. The Eternal Celestial King was already an ancient and dead person, so there was no need to waste any time and effort on him. Boom, boom, boom. The shock waves of battle rippled outward. This was a fierce battle between celestial kings, and it was more so a clash between titans of the pinnacle level. Ling Han silently navigated away, following the guidance of the small tower. However, this was no easy journey. Small Tower's guidance was extremely simple, consisting of nothing more than instructions to go up, down, left, or right. The problem was, however, that there might be obstacles such as mountains before him. How could Ling Han navigate through these obstacles? Ordinary mountains and boulders were naturally no problem. However, where was this? This was a continent where even the intense battle between celestial kings could only cause a limited amount of damage. As such, how could Ling Han possibly damage these mountains and forcefully traverse through them? It would be futile even if he were 10,000 times more powerful. Thus, he could only navigate around these mountains. Sometimes he would go too far, and sometimes he wouldn't go far enough. In any case, he had to take detours here and there, and this gave him a slight headache. He could only say that the terrain of this valley was far too complicated. In fact, he could even regard it as a formation. This was actually extremely likely. After all, this valley was the body of a cauldron, one which was used to refine paramount treasures. As such, was it strange for a formation to exist inside this cauldron? Keep going forward, it's just ahead, a little bit more. We're there. Small Tower exclaimed. A corpse lay before Ling Han. This was a cultivator in purple robes, and there was still a fly whisk in his hands. However, only the bottom half of the fly whisk remained. There was a gaping hole in his chest, a hole that had directly penetrated his heart. Apart from this, there was no other wound on the corpse. This had most likely been a fatal wound. There was a symbol of flames on the cultivator's forehead, and there was also a flower growing from his chest. This flower was as clear and transparent as jade. However, even though the flower was right before his eyes, upon closer inspection, it was as if it didn't exist at all. It was as ethereal as could be. The source power of flames? Ling Han murmured in slight disappointment. He already possessed the 9 heavens flame, so it wouldn't mean much even if he obtained another source power of the fire element. His power would definitely grow, but not by a very significant amount. From his observation, this cultivator had possessed a source power of flames. He had also practiced the regulations of space. Thus, after dying, a celestial medicine of the space element had bloomed from his body. This was a great herb 8 epochs old. This was a fairly good result. He could give the source power of flames to either the Empress or Hunyo, while they could ingest the great herb together. Nothing would be wasted. That's not the case, Small Tower said. Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking in delight, huh? Perhaps it's a source power of space? Can you use your imagination a little? Small Tower said with a sneer. This cultivator is the well-renowned Purple Fire Celestial King. At that time, he enjoyed the fortune of the heavens, and obtained 2 source powers of heaven and earth. So you're saying, both the symbol of flames and the flower are source powers of heaven and earth? Ling Han asked in surprise and delight. It was indeed a pity that there was no celestial medicine. However, obtaining 2 source powers of heaven and earth was naturally even more delightful. The flames are the purple spirit flames, while the source power of space is the spiritual void glass, Small Tower explained. The purple spirit flames are used to incinerate one's divine sense, while the spiritual void glass is used to create tens of thousands of clones of oneself. Then let's hurry up and obtain them. Ling Han exclaimed in eager excitement. Same old rules. Channel the indestructible heavens scroll. Whether you can succeed or not, that's all up to your luck. Small Tower said. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He sat down cross-legged. Wang. He started to channel the indestructible heavens scroll, upon which numerous golden symbols materialized on his body. Looking closely, there was even a hint of a 9-colored glow among this gold. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time slowly crept by. However, the 2 source powers of heaven and earth remained unmoving and unreactive. Ling Han understood that source powers of heaven and earth couldn't be aroused so easily. Right now, however, time was of the essence. Hurry. I beg of you, hurry. Ling Han released his willpower, sending it to approach the dead cultivator. This was an extremely risky move. Even though the Celestial King was already dead, a starving camel was still larger than a horse. As long as their corpse remained intact, they would possess the destructive power to obliterate the world. Could they be approached by a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? However, Ling Han had no time, so he had no option but to take this risk. Senior, you passed away for the sake of resisting the invasion by the force of darkness. Now, the force of darkness has regathered their forces, launching another assault. They've got their eyes on your 2 source powers of heaven and earth. If they succeed, that'll be a huge blow to our realm. So, this junior is going to act audaciously in violating your corpse. Please forgive me, Senior. His divine sense continued to advance, entering the most dangerous region. If he advanced any more, he might suffer the wrath of thunder. Should he advance? Of course he should. How could he retreat at such a critical moment? Ling Han gritted his teeth, and advanced another step with his divine sense. There was no reaction. Great. Ling Han's divine sense continued to advance, approaching the cultivator's body. His divine sense then funneled into the corpse. Wang. He entered an all-new world. After reaching the Celestial King tier, a person would essentially become a world of their own. In fact, they could even nurture a small world in their bodies. Where's the purple spirit flames? Where's the spiritual void glass? It's over there. Ling Han's body was still outside, so he could clearly sense the location of the purple spirit flames and the spiritual void glass. Thus, he immediately corrected his direction and advanced toward some place. He was going to look for the spiritual void glass first. Comparing the two, the spiritual void glass was definitely more important. Inside the body of a celestial king, both time and space lost their meaning. Moreover, only Ling Han's divine sense had entered, so this was much like when he cultivated under the reincarnation tree. An instant in the outside world would be tens of thousands of years in this inside world. After heaven knew how long, a valley finally appeared before Ling Han. This valley was fully carved from crystal, and it was condensed into all kinds of shapes and sizes. Ling Han walked inside, only to see a crystal hovering in the air above the center of the valley. It was shimmering with a brilliant radiance. The spiritual void glass. Ling Han walked toward it without any hesitation. His body was formed from his divine sense, so any physical contact would be contact with his divine sense. Wang. The spiritual void glass immediately reacted to his approach, with columns of light soaring into the sky. Strangely, however, he was unable to determine the colors of these columns of light. They were seemingly transparent, yet they were seemingly multicolored at the same time. They were indescribably strange. Come, come, come. Time slowly crept by. 4 days, 5 days, 6 days. Whoosh. The spiritual void glass suddenly shot into the sky. What? It's fleeing? Ling Han's divine sense immediately left the cultivator's body, only to see a streak of light shooting into the sky. Fuck. Whoosh. The streak of light drew an arc in the sky before surprisingly turning around and rapidly streaking back. It shot toward Ling Han. Ling Han was delighted, and he immediately removed his defenses, allowing the streak of light to hit him. The streak of light instantly fused into Ling Han's forehead. He had obtained the spiritual void glass, his fifth source power of heaven and earth. Ling Han laughed heartily. However, he had no time to celebrate, and he hurriedly made space in his dantian for this new source power to occupy. Next, it was time to obtain the source power of flames. Chapter 21:16, Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil. With a new source power of space entering his body, it was inevitable that there would be struggle and conflict between the source powers. Fortunately, Ling Han was already accustomed to this kind of conflict. He would allow the 5 source powers to fight to their heart's content before he mediated for them, and acted as peacemaker. Even though the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water had both been extracted from his body, their source was still engraved within him, and they didn't show any signs of wanting to move. After dealing with the spiritual void glass, it was time for him to obtain the purple spirit flames. This was slightly more difficult. This was because Ling Han couldn't absorb this source power. However, he still had to convince this source power of heaven and earth to leave with him. This was an extremely difficult task. Anyhow, he would give it a try. Since it was a source power of heaven and earth, it most likely had some form of sentience. Ling Han adjusted his direction, and arrived at the head of the cultivator. This was a sea of flames. Amid this sea of flames, there was a small dog happily jumping about. The purple spirit flames had actually taken the form of a dog. Had it developed intelligence and become a unique life form? It's only taken the preliminary step of becoming a unique and independent individual. However, it's still a long way off becoming a genuine life form, Small Tower said. In other words, this small dog only has the intelligence of a 2 to 3-year-old child? Ling Han murmured. I can trick it then. He stopped near the sea of flames, saying, Adorable puppy, come over here. Let me have a closer look. Because he was only a divine sense at this moment, his speech was naturally transmitted through his divine sense as well. There was no problem communicating with the dog. Thus, the small dog immediately looked over, cocking its head in hesitation. It's going to be very fun, Ling Han continued with his shady behavior. The small dog took a few steps over before stopping again. It wore an expression of hesitation as it gazed at Ling Han. Come on, come over here. If Ling Han's physical body were here, he would definitely retrieve all kinds of food from the Black Tower to entice the small dog. Now, however, he could only use words to trick it. The small dog stopped and started, and only after a long time did it finally reach the edge of the sea of flames. After arriving here, however, it was extremely reluctant to take another step. Come on, come over here. I also own a large black dog, and you guys might even be acquainted with each other, Ling Han continued. The small dog merely cocked its head as it looked at him. It didn't bark, and it didn't take another step forward, either. Don't be afraid, come on over, Ling Han said as he started to step back. When he retreated a fair distance, the small dog started to become restless. It continued to pace back and forth, occasionally stopping to glance at Ling Han. It was seemingly indecisive about whether it should head over or not. If you don't come now, there won't be another chance, Ling Han said as he continued to retreat. The small dog finally made up its mind, suddenly spreading its legs and sprinting toward Ling Han. Pung! It rammed into Ling Han, causing his mind to shudder. Meanwhile, his divine sense had already been pushed out from the cultivator's body. A ball of flames followed after it, and it crashed toward Ling Han's body. However, Ling Han naturally wouldn't absorb this source power of heaven and earth. Small tower, he immediately shouted in his mind. Are you sure? Small tower asked. It knew what Ling Han was thinking. I'm certain. Ling Han answered without hesitation. Wang. A black tower instantly materialized, radiating with a paramount aura. It was as if this tower was heaven and earth. This was a unique existence among heaven and earth. It was the Tower of Three Realms. The ball of flames instantly ground to a halt. Even though this was only a ball of flames, Ling Han could still feel some kind of willpower emanating from it. It was showing respect and apprehension toward the Black Tower. The Black Tower expanded slightly as it engulfed the ball of flames. With a whoosh, it then vanished as it returned to Ling Han's body. This was an extremely risky action. The Tower of Three Realms was far too powerful, and it had even transcended the level of Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings. Thus, its appearance in the world would definitely trigger shock waves among heaven and earth. Heavenly venerates could easily sense these disturbances. Ling Han only dared to do this because this was in the void. There existed boundless chaotic winds, and they could greatly muffle the shock waves caused by the Tower of Three Realms. There was a 90% chance that he could avoid the detection of heavenly venerates. If this were an ordinary environment, unless Small Tower could suppress the aura of the Black Tower, Ling Han definitely wouldn't dare to act so rashly. However, since he had a 90% chance of avoiding detection, he was willing to take a gamble. Everything remained calm. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. If a heavenly venerate truly descended, the situation would be futile even if the Black Tower unleashed its full might. You're wrong, Small Tower said with pride. If I face them head-on, I'll naturally be no match for them. However, helping you flee will be no problem at all. It's just that you'll become a target of those old folks, and you won't need to think about leaving the Black Tower anymore. Otherwise, your only fate would be death. Ling Han nodded in understanding. If he didn't need to use the Black Tower, it was best that he didn't use it. Let's go, it's time to look for the next source power of heaven and earth. Small Tower continued to guide him. After a day, they discovered a large boulder. Is there a celestial king buried underneath? Ling Han asked. Wrong. This is the celestial king. Small Tower replied with a sneer. Huh. It's a rock. This is the Azure Rock Celestial King, who was an ordinary rock before attaining Tao. Because he was sat on top of Bai, during his seclusion, he gained awareness and developed intelligence. In the end, he even became a celestial king, Small Tower said. Because he attained Tao as a rock, it was also very easy for him to receive acknowledgement from the source power of Earth. As such, he obtained the Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil. Ling Han raised his hands and asked, "Hang on, you said the Azure Rock Celestial King was sat on top of by whom during their cultivation?" "Fool, we can't speak his name. This person is far too powerful, so speaking his name will instantly grab his attention. Do you want to die?" Small Tower spoke to Ling Han as if he were a retard. "Is he one of the 3 heavenly venerates?" Ling Han asked. Small Tower didn't ridicule him this time. Ling Han was truly curious. Just who were these 3 heavenly venerates? However, if he asked, Small Tower would definitely say that he couldn't speak their names or titles. Otherwise, this would grab their attention. With a single thought, these heavenly venerates might even materialize before them. At that time, Ling Han would have no option but to retreat inside the Black Tower and spend the remainder of his life fleeing. Ling Han pushed aside his curiosity. There were more important matters to deal with at this moment. Within this rock was a source power of heaven and earth. This was something he dearly needed right now. He sat down and started to channel the indestructible heaven scroll, attracting the source power of earth inside the rock. The indestructible heaven scroll was far too powerful, being a cultivation technique created by a heavenly venerate, so it possessed a strong ability to attract source powers of heaven and earth. Thus, it wasn't long before the rock started to glow. Thump, thump, thump. It was as if the rock possessed life, and it was as if it possessed a heart that was beating. "Hurry, come over here." Ling Han didn't have much time. The battle between the Black Dragon King, the Eternal Celestial King, and Xiao Gu might end at any moment, and it was possible that the Black Dragon King might appear before him at any time. If that happened, he would either have to retreat inside the Black Tower or be killed. In any case, he would lose the chance to obtain this source power of heaven and earth. 3 days passed, and the entire rock was now glowing. It then became transparent, revealing a 5-colored block of soil in its center. This block of soil continued to transform into all kinds of shapes and figures. Pa! The rock suddenly split apart, and the 5-colored block of soil vigorously dashed into the air before flying toward Ling Han. Pooh! The block of 5-colored soil slammed into Ling Han's head before fusing into his body. Boom! Violent waves instantly surged through Ling Han's dantian. The source powers were fighting against each other again, trying to conquer more land for themselves. Fine. He would continue to act as a peacemaker. Chapter 21:17. My hands are getting tired from this rich harvest. Because he already had a wealth of previous experience, Ling Han was able to easily resolve the conflict between the 6 source powers. They each settled in an area of his dantian. Anyhow, he had finally obtained a source power of each of the 5 elements. His great clash of source powers could now unleash its full might. "Stop congratulating yourself, hurry up and get a move on," Small Tower said in impatience. Ling Han nodded in reply. He had no time to investigate the uses of the Black Tortoise Chaos Origin Soil as he stood up to leave. Several hours later, they arrived on the bank of a wide river. This was an extraordinary river, in that its contents weren't water. Instead, it was filled with tumultuous lightning. It was obvious that this led to a source power of lightning. Ling Han involuntarily thought of the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire. At that time, he had followed a river of lightning before discovering the resting place of his divine sense. How was he doing now? Had he recovered his immortal palace tier cultivation? It would be extremely difficult for him to exact revenge, right? After all, he had seemingly offended an ascending origin tier elite. Regardless of how prodigious the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire was, it would still take him millions of years to reach the ascending origin tier, right? This was taking into account the fact that he was already a prodigy among prodigies. Ling Han rid himself of these random thoughts. The source power of lightning was another source power that he didn't possess. If he obtained it, he would once again grow significantly more powerful. Has anyone obtained 9 source powers before? He suddenly asked in curiosity. Yes. Small Tower replied without any hesitation. Who? The original owner of the Black Tower, Small Tower replied. There was a hint of melancholy in his voice. Ling Han was instantly rendered speechless. It was largely because he practiced the indestructible heaven scroll that he was able to obtain 6 source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if he relied on himself, perhaps he couldn't even obtain a single source power. In comparison, the gulf between him and the original owner of the Black Tower was extremely evident. Don't lose heart. Small Tower said. The Heavenly Venerate was able to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth simply because he severed his own cultivation after reaching the 9th heaven. Before starting his new life, he had already created the indestructible heaven scroll. Ling Han was astonished upon hearing this. As it turned out, Ji Wuming wasn't the only 9th heaven celestial king to sever his own cultivation. However, this also made him feel much better. At the very least, that person also hadn't been able to obtain 9 source powers of heaven and earth from the very start. He strode forward, and it wasn't long before he reached the end of the lightning river. A pool of lightning appeared before him, and within it were arcs of crackling blue lightning liquid. Limitless in lightning. Small Tower said. Same old rules? Ling Han asked. Ling Han started to absorb the source power. With the indestructible heaven scroll, absorbing source powers of heaven and earth was no difficult task. The problem right now was time. Ling Han didn't have much time to waste. After 9 entire days, Ling Han finally managed to arouse and absorb this source power of heaven and earth. My first 4 source powers of heaven and earth all took exorbitant effort to obtain. Now, however, it's as if I can obtain them with a nod of my head. Sigh. This comparison makes me feel depressed, Ling Han said with emotion. Stop acting pitiful after you've received a benefit. Small Tower scolded. Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. Anyhow, if one didn't need to, who would want to spend an exorbitant amount of effort? However, things were genuinely far too easy now. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Following the guidance of Small Tower, he started to search for the 5th source power of heaven and earth. After walking for a short while, Ling Han came to a stop. There was a corpse before him. It was extremely normal to come across corpses here. After all, this was an ancient battlefield, so it would be strange if there was no corpse. However, this corpse was extremely peculiar. Even though it was humanoid, its features were extremely strange. It had a pair of cow hooves, and its body was also pitch black and covered in scales. There was a pair of thin cicada wings on its back, and its gigantic eyes almost took up half of its face. Meanwhile, its mouth was as thin and long as the mouth of a mosquito, and it was already beyond what could be called a mouth. Calling it an arthropod's mouthpart would be more fitting. Ling Han had come across beings from numerous races before. Regarding those that could shape-shift, even though they would maintain some features of their race, he definitely hadn't come across anything like this before. This is an elite from the foreign realm, Small Tower suddenly said. Humans from the foreign realm look like this? So ugly, Ling Han remarked. This is an 18th Lotus elite. In order to stop him, our realm dispatched 4 9th heaven celestial kings. However, even so, one of the 9th heaven celestial kings was still killed, Small Tower said. Simply to stop him? Ling Han asked with a solemn expression. The difficulty of stopping an elite and killing an elite was completely different. If even stopping a person required 4 elites of an equivalent level, especially paramount beings such as 9th heaven celestial kings, just how powerful were the elites from the foreign realm? Yes, simply to stop him, Small Tower replied in a stern voice. You can also appreciate the grave nature of this battle now, right? Is this foreign elite especially powerful, or are they all this powerful? They're all this powerful. Ling Han was genuinely stunned upon hearing this. Those who could become 9th heaven celestial kings were all top-notch prodigies. Even if there was a gap in abilities between them, this gap shouldn't be large. However, any random elite from the foreign realm could rival 4 elites from the celestial realm. It was no wonder that the celestial realm could only choose to defend, and not counterattack. It was no wonder that they couldn't comprehensively defeat the storm of darkness. Moreover, this is taking into account the fact that the elites from the foreign realm experience suppression from our heaven and earth after entering the celestial realm. Otherwise, they'll be even more powerful. Small Tower revealed an even more brutal fact. Thank heavens. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Thank heavens the celestial realm hadn't counterattacked. Otherwise, they would have faced a one-sided massacre. The ancient realm has been split into 2, the immortal realm and the netherworld. Is this because of the foreign realm? Ling Han suddenly recalled this question that had bothered him for a long time. Yes, but also no, Small Tower replied. This was a confusing answer. Fuck. If it is, then it is. If it isn't, then it isn't. What kind of answer is this? The ancient realm being split into 2 was indeed related to the invasion of the foreign realm. However, that was only a trigger. The fundamental reason was still related to the celestial realm itself, Small Tower explained. What reason is that? Ling Han asked. This involves heavenly venerates, so it's best that you don't ask, Small Tower replied. It refused to answer Ling Han's question. Related to heavenly venerates again. However, this made sense. If not heavenly venerates who had transcended the regulations of heaven and earth, who else could split the ancient realm into 2? Moreover, only at the command of heavenly venerates would the entire celestial realm obey and follow. This was why no one dared to bring those from the ancient realm into the celestial realm. However, there was something else that Ling Han was curious about. What was the reason for this? They were already paramount heavenly venerates, so how could they be afraid of a few people ascending from the ancient realm? However, this involved those 3 old monsters, so Small Tower definitely wouldn't indulge his curiosity. Otherwise, if they dared to speak the name or title of those 3 heavenly venerates, a wisp of their awareness would descend. At that time, things would truly become troublesome. Forget about it. Let's obtain the source powers of heaven and earth first. Ling Han continued to advance. 3 days later, he obtained the 5th source power of heaven and earth, the heavenly sun black gold. However, it was a shame that he already had no need for this source power. He placed it inside the black tower, and this process made him involuntarily tense up. He was afraid of attracting the attention of those 3 old monsters. Alright, even if there are more source powers of heaven and earth that you can't use, you can't place them inside the black tower anymore. Even though there's a 90% chance that it won't be discovered, the more risks you take, the higher the chance of being discovered, Small Tower said in a solemn voice. It prevented Ling Han from taking any further risks. Ling Han pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. The Empress and Hu Niu could both obtain a source power of heaven and earth. In any case, they couldn't use a source power of heaven and earth to act as their divided soul anymore. As such, having one more or one less wouldn't make too much difference. There's still a source power of slaughter ahead. Chapter 21:18, Soaring Sword Chi. In the past, Ling Han definitely wouldn't have imagined that the source power of slaughter was actually a blade of grass. Slaughter is simply a type of regulation. It possesses no physical manifestation, so when the original source power of slaughter shattered, its power of regulations gathered on this blade of grass, allowing it to remain indestructible through several epochs. In other words, this blade of grass has already become the new source power of heaven and earth, Small Tower said. Ling Han looked at the blade of grass. It was only 3 inches tall, and it only had 4 leaves, each of which was emerald green and shaped like a sword. No matter how he looked at it, this didn't look like a peculiar blade of grass that possessed the source power of slaughter. Swoosh! A gust of mountain wind raced past, causing the leaves to slightly shudder. Blades of sword chi instantly formed before slashing into the void. A terrifying sight ensued. A fissure was brutally torn in the air, and the chaotic winds were forcefully dragged to a halt. The fissure was astonishingly large. Ling Han's eyes bulged in disbelief. This was the source power of slaughter, a source power that was filled with destruction and violence. Hurry up and absorb it. The Black Dragon King has left numerous formations in the surroundings, weakening the resistance of the source power of slaughter. If we leave it alone, she'll be able to absorb it within 100,000 years, Small Tower said in a solemn voice. Ling Han nodded in reply, and he hurriedly started to channel the Indestructible Heaven Scroll. This time, however, the Indestructible Heaven Scroll surprisingly failed to work. The blade of grass remained unresponsive to Ling Han's approaches. What's going on? The regulation of slaughter hasn't been fused into the Indestructible Heaven Scroll, Small Tower explained. By the looks of it, you'll have to come up with something by yourself. Ling Han was slightly disappointed by this result. However, a powerful urge quickly overtook him. If he could obtain this source power of slaughter with his own abilities, that would be the best acknowledgement of his power. To obtain a source power of heaven and earth as a dividing soul tier cultivator? Perhaps no one could achieve this. Even if they could, they would most likely require help from their elders. Ling Han released his thoughts to communicate with the blade of grass. The greatest difference between him and the Black Dragon King was a fundamental one. The Black Dragon King was now practicing the cultivation system of the foreign realm. In a fundamental sense, she no longer belonged to this realm. Thus, source powers of heaven and earth would also feel innate resistance and disgust toward her. They definitely wouldn't show intimacy toward her. Thus, the Black Dragon King had no option but to use formations which would slowly weaken the resistance of these source powers over time. Her abilities were astonishing, and add to that her seventh heaven cultivation, and it was entirely possible that she could succeed. Now that Ling Han had arrived, however, she had unwittingly paved the way for him. Indeed, Ling Han's cultivation was far inferior to that of the Black Dragon King. However, he was genuinely a being from the celestial realm. If the source power were forced to make a choice, would it choose a mortal enemy or an unfamiliar relative? Thus, Ling Han had faced few obstacles when obtaining the previous few source powers of heaven and earth. This was in part thanks to the Indestructible Heaven Scroll, and in part thanks to the preparations made by the Black Dragon King. However, if the Black Dragon King learned of this, she certainly wouldn't take credit with a smile on her face. Instead, she would go wild with rage. Her hard work of tens of billions of years. It had all been stolen by a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. Thus, the difficulty of obtaining this source power of slaughter was also several times smaller than it should have been. Otherwise, a dividing soul tier cultivator daring to obtain the source power of slaughter? A single burst of sword chi would slash them into smithereens. Since this was the source power of slaughter, he would try to attract it with his fighting spirit. Ling Han unleashed his raging fighting spirit. This was an aura that wouldn't yield even before powerful enemies. So what if his opponent was Ji Wuming, the reincarnation of a ninth heaven celestial king? He was filled with fighting spirit, and he was brimming with confidence that he could one day defeat this opponent. He was burning with passion, and his fighting spirit became something tangible. Like sabers, like spears, like swords, and like fists, his fighting spirit roared like the drums of battle. After a long time, the blade of grass finally swayed slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Its 4 leaves shuddered, unleashing 4 bursts of powerful sword chi. Pang, pang, pang. A large portion of the mountain wall was instantly sliced off. Ling Han was astounded by this sight. He had personally witnessed the strength of this valley, yet the attack from the source power of slaughter made the mountain wall look like nothing but jelly. Its destructive power was absolutely terrifying. At the same time, this also made him feel even more enticed. He practiced the regulation of slaughter, but how could this compare to the source power of slaughter? If he obtained it, his battle prowess would rise by a significant amount. Ji Wuming. there was still a ball of unyielding passion in his heart. So what if he had reincarnated from a ninth heaven celestial king? As long as he put in the hard work, he could definitely overcome the gulf between them and defeat this opponent. Swoosh! The blade of grass continued to sway, sending bursts of sword chi into the surroundings. Some blade of sword chi scraped past Ling Han's face, only a hair away from cutting into him. However, Ling Han remained as still as a mountain. He didn't evade. In fact, it was fortunate that he remained unmoving. Otherwise, if he suddenly moved, it would perhaps result in him being struck by the bursts of powerful sword chi. With the terrifying power of the source power of slaughter, being struck by the sword chi would definitely obliterate his divine sense in an instant. Ling Han understood that this was a test from the source power of slaughter. It wanted to determine whether he was worth following. This was a good development. After all, if the source power didn't even want to test him, how could he hope to ever obtain it? He remained calm and composed, simply unleashing his blazing fighting spirit. He wanted to let the source power of slaughter know that if it followed him, it could battle to its heart's content. Even though the source power of slaughter was named as such, slaughter wasn't the main substance of this source power. Instead, it was battle. It would evolve through battle, and this evolution would allow it to slay elites. Boom! Ling Han's fighting spirit was unbounded and scorching, and it was almost about to condense into something tangible. In terms of fighting spirit alone, he was truly no inferior to any celestial king. This was an unyielding demeanor that he had developed as someone who had fought his way up from a small world. What did it matter even if his opponent were a heavenly venerate? Ling Han didn't fear them at all. He had the conviction and confidence that he could definitely defeat them in the future. The blade of grass started to sway more and more, filling the sky with blades of sword chi. It was as if it wanted to obliterate the entire valley. Brat, you dare? There was a shrill scream as a black dragon swooped over from the distance. Pang, pang, pang. It unleashed its might as it soared over, reducing the surrounding mountain walls into ashes. The Black Dragon King had come. The Eternal Celestial King had definitely been laid to a final rest, returning to ashes and dust. However, what about Xiao Gu? Ling Han couldn't help but feel anxious as he thought about this. He had always been caring toward his friends. Now that the Black Dragon King was charging over without Xiao Gu, he couldn't help but feel uneasy and worried for Xiao Gu. However, with the dire situation that he was in now, it was actually himself that he needed to worry about the most. The Black Dragon King was charging over. Wang! She made a slashing motion with her claw, and a colossal dragon claw bore down from the sky. To say nothing of one Ling Han, even tens of thousands of him would be killed by this attack. Was he going to fall at the final hurdle? Right at this moment, however, the blade of grass suddenly swayed slightly. Whoosh! A burst of brilliant sword chi slashed up at the dragon claw. Pooh! As the burst of sword chi slashed past, the colossal dragon claw was instantly sliced into two. Ling Han was delighted upon seeing this. He hadn't imagined that the source power of slaughter would actually save him. Xiao! The blade of grass suddenly uprooted itself from the ground, revealing its roots that were less than 1 inch long. These roots were as clear as crystal, and they possessed some kind of indescribable beauty. The blade of grass shot toward Ling Han. Although it had blocked an attack of the Black Dragon King, that was because the Black Dragon King had unleashed the attack from extremely far away. Moreover, she also hadn't unleashed her full power. After all, did she need to unleash her full power to kill a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? For her next attack, however, the Black Dragon King would definitely unleash her full power. It would definitely be unblockable. The source power had still been hesitant at first, unsure of whether it should follow Ling Han or not. Now that it was being pressured by the Black Dragon King, however, it immediately abandoned its hesitation, and directly leaped at Ling Han. Brat, if you dare to absorb the source power of slaughter, I'll make you experience the worst torture imaginable, the Black Dragon King roared. A mighty celestial king was actually threatening a measly dividing soul tier cultivator? This was inconceivable, yet it was indeed happening at this moment. However, how could Ling Han pay any heed to her? He relaxed his body and awaited the arrival of the blade of grass. Xiao! The blade of grass vanished with a flash, fusing into Ling Han's forehead. Chapter 21:19, Way to Leave. Damn! Damn! The Black Dragon King's fury incinerated the heavens, her killing intent blazing like an ocean. She sent out another palm strike at Ling Han. Yaya! A familiar voice rang out. Xiao Gu appeared, but this time, Xiao Gu was no longer in human form, but rather was a bone that was diffused in celestial qi. Practically ignoring all rules of space, he appeared instantly in front of Ling Han. Boom, the Black Dragon King's strike descended. Xiao Gu was instantly sent flying. If he was alone, he was considerably inferior to the Black Dragon King, and would not be qualified to block the Black Dragon King's strike. However, his original body was as tough as divine metal, and even after sustaining a blow from the Black Dragon King, he was still undamaged. A frightening storm of energy surged past. This was the furious blow venting the anger of a seventh heaven celestial king. Long, black-colored energy was surging through the entire valley violently, and turning into an ocean. The power of regulation that did not belong to this realm was flaring, but because it could not achieve resonance and be replenished by the regulations of heaven and earth, it was already disappearing at an overwhelmingly fast rate. To the heaven and earth, this kind of energy, this kind of regulations was a disease. Thus, the body would heal itself as soon as possible, and erase this kind of energy and regulations. Where is he? Black Dragon King's figure descended, but there was no further trace of Ling Han in the valley. He has definitely not been crushed, but has rather hidden into a spatial god tool. She had seen very clearly. In the instant the storm of energy attacked him, Ling Han's figure had disappeared in a flash. In that case, he had to have entered into a spatial god tool. However, what kind of spatial god tool could remain unharmed after sustaining a blow from her? A celestial king tool? An expression of confusion appeared on her face. Wherever this brat is, I must find him. He actually retrieved 6 source powers of heaven and earth. There are only a total of 9 here. Damn it, he is really despicable. The Black Dragon King stomped her foot. She had thought that only the eternal celestial king and Xiao Gu were her greatest foes. She had not imagined that the one to really stab her in the back was what was only an ant in her eyes. Don't let me find you, or I will let you know what hell on earth means. She swore harshly, her divine sense spreading out, and beginning to search for Ling Han all over the world. Could she find Ling Han? The answer was negative. It was not that the Black Tower's concealment ability was very strong, but rather that Ling Han was no longer on this mainland. After being struck by the Black Dragon King, the Black Tower had soared to the skies with all the other dirt and dust. Then, it was swept into the vacuum, and instantly blown away by the storm of energy. Very soon, it became unknown how far away it had been swept away. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han sprawled out on the ground, panting harshly. Just now, it had really been extremely dangerous. If it were not the source power of slaughter and Xiao Gu having each blocking a blow for him, he probably would not have had any time to enter into the Black Tower. Too dangerous, he concluded. If he had to bet his life on the chances of having someone else save him, what if there came a day that no one came to save him? However, if I had not taken the risk at that time, I would not have been able to retrieve the source power of slaughter. There was no other alternative, he continued. I can still use rising from the ashes, and have the capital to die once. He laid down this matter first, and began to inspect himself. There were a total of 8 source powers. He was only 1 more source power away from the maximum limit of 9. It had seemed to be an incredibly difficult task to manifest 9 divided souls at dividing soul tier, and would possibly need an extensive time of tens of billions or hundreds of billions of years to accomplish, but he had not thought that he would be able to retrieve a total of 4 source powers of heaven and earth in one go. To be frank, I really have to thank that vicious bear gang leader. Additionally, for a daughter-in-law to bring so much good fortune even to her father-in-law, she would definitely bring even more good fortune to my son. And this daughter-in-law definitely cannot be missed. Still, how am I supposed to leave? This was vacuum. The violent energy here could even destroy ascending origin tier elites. No matter how strong Ling Han's physique was, there was no way it had reached ascending origin tier. In that case, it would only be committing suicide if he left. Then what was he to do? Just stay inside the Black Tower, right until he cultivated all the way to Celestial King tier? That was impossible. To manifest his Earth soul and Heaven soul, he would have to go to a specific location. It was the same for Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier. If he stayed inside the Black Tower, he would only be stuck at Een Soul tier for his whole life, and then as time passed, he would be plagued by the Immortal's tribulation. There would eventually come a day when the Immortal's tribulation strengthened to an extent where his lifespan would be severed. Small Tower, is there any way out? Ling Han asked. There are 2 options, Small Tower answered in a very calm tone. There were actually as many as 2 options? Tell me about it. First, I let the Black Tower release its might, and it would naturally be a piece of cake to tear open a rip in space, and return to the celestial realm, Small Tower said. However, if that were to happen, those old monsters would definitely discover my existence. Ling Han sighed. Though this could immediately solve the problem, the new problem that would be caused seemed to be even more troublesome, so he could only skip this option. Then, what's the second choice? You can use the source powers of the 5 elements to protect yourself, and would be able to resist the space storm for an extremely short time. Then, you can use the great clash of source powers, and there is a chance that you can break out of this space, Small Tower said. Then, that's decided. Ling Han did not want to waste any more time, and immediately sat down in a cross-legged position, beginning to deal with the source powers of heaven and earth inside his body. Firstly, it was a very migraine-inducing matter to have 8 different source powers to get along well. Each and every source power wanted to monopolize the world inside Ling Han's dantian. This naturally needed Ling Han to play mediator. And it just so happened that all of them were bosses. If any one of them left Ling Han's main body, they would have the ability to kill him instantly. Thus, Ling Han could only harmonize them, and could not suppress them by force. This made him feel very depressed. Thankfully, he had dealt with all 8 of these source powers of heaven and earth within 7,000 years, and because time passed swiftly inside the Black Tower, he had actually only used 7 years in real time. Let's try out the defense of source powers first, Ling Han mumbled to himself. The 5 elements supported and subdued each other, and could cause a burst of terrifying destructive power. At the same time, they could also form a boundless defense through their mutual support. He began experimenting. Even if time passed at an accelerated pace inside the Black Tower, he had still used up what would equate to 4,000 years in real time to finally smoothen out the power of the 5 elements so that they could form Celestial King tier defense for a very short period of time. This time was so short that it was practically non-existent. In an actual battle, it would be too ineffective because when the attack of an elite shot over, it was impossible that it would surge over completely in a single instant. Then, what was the point of blocking the attack for an instant? However, it was of great help in solving his present dilemma because Ling Han could control when he would sustain the barrage of the storm in the vacuum. He was an outrageously bold man, and he rushed out of the Black Tower without the slightest hesitation. Boom, the violent storm of energy immediately assaulted him. With a bang, Ling Han immediately retreated back into the Black Tower. At least half of all the bones in his body were broken, his face as pale as paper. Almost half his life was gone. Fuck, the time it can be maintained is even shorter than I imagined. When I exited and came back in, I have still been grazed by the storm of energy, and almost died. Ling Han felt lingering fear. Even if he could use rising from the ashes, to revive and vacuum was actually just committing suicide again. No, I have to make it that the time it can be maintained would be extended just a bit more. For the sake of this bit of additional time, Ling Han spent another 3,000 years in real time. One attempt after another, and though he was still injured every time, the extent of his injuries was becoming lighter. Finally, one day, he did not suffer the slightest injury when he exited and re-entered. All right, now it's only the great clash of source powers. Time to see if it can tear a rip and vacuum. Chapter 21-20, Opening the Passage. Ling Han entered a long period of seclusion once more. Though he had mastered the great clash of source powers of 4 source powers, to have 5 source powers clash was not something as simple as just adding another into the equation. Instead, he had to form a relation of mutual interaction with the other 4 source powers. There were too many aspects that he had to attend to at the same time. In the process of his attempts, Ling Han killed himself another 3 times. Thankfully, he had learned his lesson. After each time he used Rising from the Ashes, he would wait until this ability recovered to continue testing out dangerous actions. He would not waste the other time either. He was studying the 4 new source powers, and his battle prowess improved further. In fact, he had a feeling that he would be able to match Ji Wuming even without using the great clash of source powers. This was not impossible, because Ji Wuming also had a powerful move to burst his battle prowess. Ling Han was close to obtaining all 9 source powers of heaven and earth, and if this still did not allow his usual battle prowess to catch up to Ji Wuming's, it would really be too unjust. After all, a 9th heaven celestial king would also have to break the limits of his own cultivation level. It was only that he would be able to use more power of regulations. 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. Ling Han had finally completed cultivating the new great clash of source powers. He exited the Black Tower, and began to barrage the vacuum. Pung! He spread out the shield of source power, and then burst out with a frightening strike. Boom! When this landed on the vacuum, it was like a small pebble being tossed into a great river. The splash created was practically negligible. No, the power is too weak. Again. Ling Han continued his seclusion, and 70 years later, he made another attempt. There's some improvement, but still too weak. Again. The power is stronger again, but still considerably lacking. Again. 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 Another 3,000 years passed, and Ling Han had already forgotten the matter of leaving the vacuum. Instead, he had placed all his focus and energy on the matter of the great clash of source powers. The power of this secret technique had been developed to a brand new height at his hand. The clash of 4 source powers in the past was practically negligible compared to this. 5 elements perfected, not only could it match time, space, and other regulations, it could even far surpass them. After all, this was 5 types of regulations of heaven and earth. Boom! Ling Han came out to barrage the vacuum as per usual, testing out the might of the great clash of source powers. He had not thought that a massive change would happen this time round. The vacuum split apart, and a passage was revealed. Huh! Ling Han was startled. This passage only appeared for an instant. His power was too weak. The space passage he created was too unstable, and could only be maintained for an instant. Success! Ling Han had already returned to the Black Tower. He had realized that he had successfully ripped open the void at this moment, and could return to the celestial realm. He laughed loudly, and then exited the Black Tower with a leap once more, and blasted out his strongest attack. The void split apart again, and a passage was revealed. Without the slightest hesitation, he rushed inside. Boom! His whole body shook madly, and he had not gotten his wits back yet when a bright sky appeared suddenly ahead of him. Bang! He dropped down from the skies, crashing heavily into the ground. He felt like even his internal organs were trembling wildly, and felt incredibly horrible. When he had entered into the vacuum, he had been protected by Lu Herong, but now he himself had traversed the vacuum. This kind of feeling was really too terrible. Deity? Demon? The voices of a few kids rang out in Ling Han's ear. He forced himself to open his eyes, and saw 4 small faces appear above him. They were all surveying him with great curiosity. When they saw Ling Han's eyes open, these 4 kids all got a shock, and hurriedly ducked their heads back in. Ling Han struggled to get to his feet. It was enough to experience this kind of feeling once. He had no wish to experience it a second time. He straightened up, and surveyed his surroundings. He was at the head of a small village. There was a massive path of limestone here, and in the middle, there was a well, which was also built from limestone, and it actually had a soft luster to it, just like limestone. Where is this place? Ling Han asked the 4 children. The 4 kids shook their heads simultaneously, staying very much on guard against him. Ling Han smiled, and took out some sweets from the Black Tower. With Hu Niu by his side, he definitely did not lack snacks. I will give this to whoever tells me. This is Great Wong Village, the 4 kids answered at the same time. Ling Han laughed loudly, and split the sweets among the 4 children. Then, he asked, do you know which heavenly realm this is? The difficulty level of this question was slightly too high for the 4 children, and the 4 kids all shook their heads dumbly. What is the nearest city called? They still shook their heads. Forget it. He had best find it on his own. Hopefully, he had not been swept back into the Eastern Celestial Realm. This was not impossible. The vacuum and the Celestial Realm did not correspond to one another. It was possible that he entered from the Eastern Celestial Realm, and after traveling for a while and coming back out, he would have already arrived in the Western Celestial Realm. However, this kind of a journey did not have any accuracy at all, and even a celestial king could not possibly traverse the void for a journey. Ling Han soothed his wildly trembling internal organs, and then leaped up, moving his limbs slightly. He felt like he was filled with explosive power. More than 10,000 years had passed in real time, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, more than 10 million years had passed. He had long since cultivated Een Soul Tier to the pinnacle. Thus, he decided to first break through to Earth's soul, and then head to the Rock Palace. He entered the village, and found some elders of the village to ask around. The adult men had all entered the mountains for hunting, while the women were gathering wild fruits in the woods. There were only elderly and children in this village until evening time. The nearest city here is called Great Cloud City, an old man said. I have been there in my youth. Young man, that really is a prosperous place. I really had an impulse not to return here years ago, but for the sake of my wife and kids, I still gritted my teeth and came back. Ling Han smiled slightly. Even if they did not cultivate, the people of the Celestial Realm had an extremely long lifespan. Usually, it would be around 500 years, and this old man had been alive for more than 450 years, and had really reached the end of his years. But compared to Ling Han, the old man would only be the junior of a junior. Going by real time, Ling Han had been alive for more than 10,000 years, and added with the time acceleration's effects, he was already an old monster that had been alive for over 10 million years. Being called a young man by someone who had only been alive for over 450 years, Ling Han felt slightly amused. Without his knowing, he had already passed a very long time. If you're heading to Great Cloud City, you should head east after you exit the village. You have to walk a total of 3 years to be able to reach there, the old man continued, and then patted Ling Han's shoulder. Young man, you had best just settle down here. You look quite talented, so it would not be difficult to find a wife. Ling Han smiled, and drew out an alchemical pill, which he laid down. To him, it was not valuable, but for mortals, it was incredibly precious. It could reforge the old man's body, and from now on, he would be strong and healthy. It would be no difficult task to continue living for another 200 years. Actually, this was not an alchemical pill to increase one's lifespan, so its effects were not very good. However, for a mortal, this was already enough. Old man, take care, Ling Han stood up and walked out of the old man's thatched cottage. He had just taken a step when he heard a powerful tremor sound from the earth. It was not an earthquake, but rather something created by some creature stomping on the ground. He paused slightly. Only a while later, he saw over a dozen handsome horses gallop over from the distance, directly barging into the village. These horses were not any mortal breed, but had a sliver of the bloodline of the dragon tribe. Their hooves were covered with dragon scales, and they appeared very majestic and mighty. When these horses barged in, their speed actually did not slow down. There were two children presently playing around in the middle of the path, and they were instantly scared silly. In just a moment, they would be run over. Chapter 21-21, Going to the Lu Clan. Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a groan. Though it was only a glance, he had seen very clearly that there were a total of 17 horses, and there was a person riding on every single horse. They were all men, and they all had a strong air of arrogance in their expressions. There's a kid standing in the path, and not only do you people not pull on the reins to stop the horses, you don't even slow down? Instantly, fury soared up in Ling Han. With a flash, he had already appeared in front of those two children, standing as proud as a mountain. Pung! 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 These riders had absolutely no intention of pulling on the reins, and thus naturally crashed directly into him. When the first horse collided with him, how could it possibly send Ling Han flying? Instantly, the front hooves of the horse stumbled, and the back hooves soared, completely overturned from the crash. The horses behind could not brake in time at all, and crashed right into the horse in front of them. This caused a chain of horse accidents. In an instant, 7 horses had completely crashed into each other. Some had even broken their necks, twitching on the ground, and frothing at the mouths. Those 7 riders had naturally also fallen on the ground. However, they were all cultivators, so they immediately got back to their feet, though their expressions were slightly stunned. What was going on here? How had they been thrown off their horses? Whoa! The remaining 10 riders all pulled on the reins of their horses, turning their mounts around, and looking towards Ling Han. One of them demanded, "Who are you to actually dare block our path?" Ling Han ignored him completely, and only patted the heads of the 2 children. "It's fine now. Don't cry. Go and play." Those 2 children had completely no idea how dangerous the previous scene was. They had only gotten a bad scare. Crying, they ran to the side of the path. "Brat, 7th brother is talking to you." The rider from before raised his voice. He seemed to be the leader of the band of 17. The 7 people that had been thrown off their horses finally regained their wits, and all of them were furious. They had something very pressing and urgent, and could not afford to stop at all. Thus, even though they had clearly seen some children blocking their path, they had no plans to rein in their horses at all. However, they had not imagined that an elite would suddenly pop out of this tiny village, and throw their horses over. They all drew their weapons, glaring at Ling Han with eyes filled with killing intent. Ling Han crossed his arms behind him. These 17 people hadn't even entered the severing mundane tier, so it was naturally impossible that he would take them seriously. "7th brother, let's just kill him," a rider exclaimed. That 7th brother hesitated for a moment, but said, "We should prioritize our main task. Let's just give up those 7 cloud galloping horses. We'll just squeeze together, and set off immediately. Brat, consider yourself lucky. If this had been any other time, you would have long since been chopped into several hundred pieces." These riders declared. The 7 people that had been thrown off their horses rode together with the others, getting ready to leave. "Wait." Ling Han stretched out his arms. "You plan to leave just like this? Those 2 kids have probably gotten psychological trauma from your scare, so don't you think you should leave some compensation? Fuck, who do you think you are? You think you are all that impressive just because we give you some leeway?" One of the riders abused him roundly. "7th brother, this brat is practically courting death. Let us just kill him." Some of the riders got restless, their vicious nature flaring. All right. Seventh brother thought for a moment before nodding. Since Ling Han was so determined to seek death, they could only oblige him. 5 riders immediately jumped off their horses, and then spread out, surrounding Ling Han. Though their words were very overbearing, they did not dare to underestimate Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had just used his body to forcibly stop the cloud-galloping horse. This kind of strength was still quite powerful. Charge! They all brandished their respective weapons, charging to attack Ling Han. Chung, 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 chung. Ling Han did not dodge or evade, and these weapons naturally all slashed onto him. However, to say nothing of his physique, even the clothing he was wearing was woven from the fur of dividing soul-tier immortal beasts. How could it be penetrated by the power of a few Genesis tears? Not only did they not manage to pierce through, they were also bounced backwards. Pu. Immediately, 5 of their heads had been smashed by their own weapons. There were 2 that were more fortunate. One of their weapons had slashed into his left shoulder, and his whole person was practically about to be sliced apart, blood gushing forth madly. The other had been split apart from his lower abdomen, and had become 2 halves. At least they weren't dead. What? The remaining 12 were all green with shock. How could they have possibly imagined that there would actually be such a terrifying elite in such a tiny village of mortals? Though they themselves were shockingly weak as well. In the celestial realm, anyone that had not advanced into severing mundane tier definitely could not be considered any elite. Ling Han spread out his hands. This has nothing to do with me. Indeed, he had not made any movement at all. It was only because these 5 people were too weak. The 12 men all looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at a demonic monster. They could feel their butt cheeks trembling, and those that were less brave were almost about to lose control over their bladders. Come, tell me what urgent matter you have that you cannot even concern yourself with 2 kids in your path? Ling Han's expression darkened. He was very furious. He knew that he could not take control of all injustices in this world, but since he had seen it, he would stretch out his hand and interfere. Those 12 men all exchanged looks, none daring to speak. Ling Han casually flicked a finger, and a streak of sword chi swept past. One of the riders was slashed in 2. His lower half was still seated on his horse, but his upper body had slowly slipped down, and landed with a crash on the ground. Still not speaking? I'll speak. I'll speak, a rider immediately screamed out shrilly, tears and snot pouring down his face. We are the servants of the Lu clan of Great Cloud City. Recently, we have sustained the joint attacks of the Kong clan, and are already in mortal peril. Hence, under the command of the clan leader, we are heading to Green Willow City to use the summoning formation there to contact a powerful force to ask them to send some people to solve our predicament. One person took the lead to break the silence, and the others naturally began trying to outdo one another and blurted out their replies, fearing that they would be killed by Ling Han if they did not speak. Oh, what level of forces are the Lu clan and Kong clan? And what is that great force? Ling Han asked carelessly. He had already lost interest, and planned to cripple the cultivation levels of these people to prevent them from causing further harm to others in the future. Our Lu clan and the Kong clan are both severing mundane tier clans, and because Kong clan has a grand elder that has broken through to the 4th severance, they have suddenly gotten the upper hand, causing our Lu clan to suffer repeated defeats. If we're talking about that great force, you would definitely be terrified to death. Imperial Void Sect. Ling Han faltered for a moment. Imperial Void? Is the sect master of the Imperial Void Sect the Imperial Void Celestial King? It is that lord, precisely. Those 12 riders' expressions were all filled with manic excitement. In the celestial realm, celestial kings represented invincibility and absolute superiority. Ling Han was surprised. This was really a coincidence. To actually hear news of the Imperial Void Celestial King in this place. The ancestor of the Qing clan, an 8th heaven celestial king, had been besieged by several celestial kings and left injured. Meanwhile, the Qing clan was massacred by the Imperial Void Celestial King. If it had not been for the formation laid down by the Celestial King of the Qing clan, which had sent the ancestral grounds of the Qing clan into the ancient realm, there wouldn't have been even a roof tile left behind. The large black dog had also said before that there was an unusual genius who had crippled his own cultivation level after he accomplished the 5th severance in the Severing Mundane tier. Then, he had recultivated Severing Mundane tier from the beginning, and when he could achieve no further severance, he finally advanced to the Dividing Soul tier. This unusual genius was the Imperial Void Celestial King. Most importantly, the Imperial Void Celestial King had some link with the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Heavenly Venerate. A small Severing Mundane tier clan was actually linked with the Imperial Void Celestial King? Ling Han became very curious, and said, "Come, let's go to the Lu clan." Chapter 21-22, Do not trouble yourself on entertaining me. Go to the Lu clan? Why are you going to the Lu clan? Haven't you vented enough of your anger? Are you planning to commit mass killing at the Lu clan? Ling Han glared. If I tell you to lead the way, lead the way. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? Never mind. He directly stretched out his hand, and lifted that 7th brother who was the leader. Then, he flicked out several streaks of energy, crippling the cultivation level of all the others. This was the punishment that he had sentenced them to for disregarding human life. Xiao, using regulations of space, his figure flashed and then reappeared, and he had already left millions and millions of miles behind him. He had obtained the spiritual void glass, and this source power of heaven and earth could allow him to possess innumerable doppelgangers in the vicinity of his body, as if countless mirrors had been placed. There would be thousands of images, and he could switch with any doppelganger he liked. In battle, this was incredibly practical. With millions of doppelgangers, who would be able to catch any trace of his real self and deliver a fatal strike. On the other hand, he could attack through whichever doppelganger he liked, and there was practically no gap in his attacks. And added with a slight change, this could also be used in his movement technique. True body, manifested body, true body, manifested body. Continuously switching from one to the other, he could practically advance a great distance without wasting any time every time a switch was made, being even faster than lightning. If I added the regulations of lightning into the equation, could I become even faster? As Ling Han journeyed, he stroked his chin in thought. A normal person would have to travel for 3 years to complete the journey from this place to Great Cloud City, but to Ling Han, it was only a matter of 2 to 3 steps. He had not even finished a thought, and a majestic great city emerged before him. He stopped, and released his grip. Wah! 7th brother immediately threw up, feeling like all his organs had been flipped and overturned to the point that they were about to rip out of his stomach. He was only in the Genesis tier, so how could his body sustain this kind of spatial movement? Yet Ling Han did not feel the slightest sympathy. A person like him who disregarded human life deserved it. He walked forwards, a thread of energy turning into a rope that bound 7th brother, dragging him with him. Halt! When they arrived outside the city gates, Ling Han was stopped by the guards. Entrance fee. 7th brother. One of the guards saw 7th brother who was being towed around by Ling Han, and immediately got a shock. What, 7th brother? Another guard looked towards 7th brother, his eyes flickering slightly. The Lu clan was a noble clan of Great Cloud City, and so was the Kong clan. These two clans had joint control of Great Cloud City, and that applied to the entrance fee for entering the city. The clans were in charge of 2 city gates, respectively, and this place was the city gate that was under the control of the Lu clan. However, a great conflict had recently erupted between the Lu clan and Kong clan, and the Kong clan was clearly enjoying the upper hand. It seemed like not only was the Lu clan going to be defeated, it was even possible that they would completely withdraw from Great Cloud City. Thus, these guards that were under the jurisdiction of the Lu clan naturally had other thoughts. Should they change sides to the Kong clan soon? Then, they only had to apprehend 7th brother, and if they delivered him to the Kong clan, then even if they could not get a great reward, it would be enough as a show of their stand. At the very least, seventh brother was also a centurion of the Lu clan's troops. However, they immediately discovered something off. That was because they saw that seventh brother seemed to be tied by an invisible rope. When Ling Han moved, he would move as well, like he was a dead pig being dragged around. Hiss, they could not trifle with him. They all shook their heads. To say nothing of snatching the hostage from Ling Han's hands, they did not even collect city entrance fees from him, respectfully escorting Ling Han into the city. After being guards for so many years, they had also acquired a considerable insight. There were some people that could not be trifled with. Ling Han naturally did not object, and asked seventh brother, which direction? There. Seventh brother had completely lost all temper, and pointed in a direction. Ling Han used the regulations of space, and rapidly advanced. After about 15 minutes, he stopped. A town had appeared ahead in a small world. This could completely be considered a massive city, but in the celestial realm, this was only a small town. They had arrived at the Lu clan. However, there was a huge army surrounding the small town, and catapults were presently shooting out massive rocks that flew and blasted in the direction of the small town. Tong! The massive rocks had not even landed when a shield of light appeared above the small town and blocked them, and after every crash, the shield of light would tremble as multiple seals flickered. Clearly, the Lu clan was protected by a defense formation, and the Kong clan was using the most primitive method to unravel their defenses, exhausting all the energy of the formation. Ling Han only swept a passing glance and immediately understood. This formation was powered by human power, and at this moment, there were several hundred people that were inserting their origin power into this formation. A great many people had already paled, and they could not last much longer. Sight indeed could not take a turn, but divine sense was like mercury being poured onto the ground, and could be everywhere. Seventh brother was dumbfounded in shock. He had just left Lu clan 3 days ago, but in the blink of an eye, he had returned once more. Just how powerful was this man? Who are you? In the outer circle of the town, a member of the Kong clan discovered Ling Han, and immediately flew over in a leap, calling out towards him in loud rebuke. Someone here to watch the show. No need to trouble yourself to entertain me, Ling Han said with a smile, not even stopping in his advance. Entertain your head. Someone was more quick-tempered, and immediately pounced over, waving his saber at Ling Han. Sigh. Seventh brother released a soundless sigh, as if he could already see how this person would end. As expected, when the saber slashed onto Ling Han's body with a bang, not only had it not managed to pierce through Ling Han's defense, the force ricocheted back towards the attacker at an extraordinarily fast speed. With a pu, the latter's head was directly smashed into bits. Ling Han did not feel any sympathy. If this person had been more merciful, and had not used his full force, he should have been able to easily disperse this blow that had bounced back towards him. It was his own decision to leave no way out for others, which also announced his own death sentence. How dare you? An elite. The members of the Kong clan all exclaimed in shock, and after a momentary commotion, a person strode out. His face was square, and looked very dignified. This was a Severing mundane tier, and he was only a third severance. However, everyone had a different destiny depending on their different origins. Some Severing mundane tiers could only lower themselves to becoming thieves and gangsters, while there would be some that would be posing around, putting on airs greater than even ascending origin tier elites. Sir, the destruction of the Lu clan is already a foregone conclusion, so why do you have to touch this pool of troubled water? He asked calmly, his tone even. Only a Genesis tier had died, which naturally could not cause any stir of emotion in him. The other party had to be a Severing mundane tier elite. If he was a fourth severance, and the Lu clan had 2 such elites, the matter would not be settled easily. Ling Han broke into a smile. I already said that you do not have to trouble yourself to entertain me. That's it. He waved a hand dismissively, and continued onwards. Hee hee, then let me first take a measure of you, sir. That third Severance Grand Elder moved, and grabbed at Ling Han's shoulder. If he could easily succeed, then he would kill Ling Han with the next blow. To dare to interfere in the matters of the Kong clan, the newcomer had to be tired of living. And if the other's strength was very powerful, no weaker than the elders, the latter would then advise the former to leave. After all, it was a very troublesome matter to be targeted by a severing mundane Grand Elder. Unless he had the certainty that he could kill him definitely, he could not be easily offended. The Kong clan was a big household, with innumerable clan members, and how many of them had attained severing mundane tier? Ling Han seemed to have completely failed to sense the approach of this blow. He did not stop moving, or even turn his head at all. You are seeking death. That third Severance Grand Elder's killing intent instantly blazed. His hand was already less than an inch away from Ling Han's back. He had absolute certainty that he could kill Ling Han. Just die then. Without the slightest hesitation, he clawed out at Ling Han's back. Ah! A pained cry rang out. Chapter 21-23, Why Have You Come? Anyone would think that the person that had released this pained shout should be Ling Han, but the result had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. That third Severance Grand Elder of the Kong clan was clasping his right wrist, his expression filled with agony. His blow had landed on Ling Han's back, yet it was as if he had struck divine metal. Furthermore, because he had intended to kill, he was both harsh and heavy in his assault, which had directly broken his 5 fingers by the force of the rebound. The nerves of the fingertips were linked with the heart, so it was naturally extremely painful. Ah! That third Severance Grand Elder was screaming incredibly miserably, tears practically streaming down his cheeks. Ling Han turned his head slightly, and asked, "Are you all right?" "All right? Fuck all right, of course I am not all right." However, what that third Severance Grand Elder felt even more was terror. The other man had not dodged or evaded, allowing the Elder's attack to land solidly, but the result was that it was instead the Elder whose finger bones had been broken. Just what kind of astonishing strength was this? My lord. He forcibly suppressed the pain, and greeted Ling Han respectfully. "This junior is fine." "Then what were you screaming for?" Ling Han pretended to be surprised. "This junior has lost his mind," that third Severance Grand Elder hurriedly declared. Ling Han gave an "oh." "Then you should get some treatment." He extended a hand and pressed down. Pa! That third Severance Grand Elder was instantly rendered into 7 or 8 pieces, but Ling Han had not dealt a fatal blow. Thus, if that third Severance Grand Elder was pieced together, he could still rebuild himself, and continue living. But everyone, whether those outside or inside the town, was dumbfounded and gaping with shock. That was too strong, wasn't it? 4th Severance Grand Elder? At least that, and he might even be a king tier among 4th Severance powerhouses at that. Otherwise, how could he possibly be so powerful? In this instant, no one knew what kind of relation Ling Han had with the Liu clan, whether they were enemies or friends. Thus, the Liu clan side did not feel unburdened, while the Kong clan side did not dare continue their assault either. All of a sudden, a silence had fallen. One person alone could decide the battle. This was the effect of an elite. Ling Han was unconcerned. He continued to drag 7th brother as he walked forwards, and very quickly, he had arrived in front of the small town. The defense formation was just a short distance ahead. On the city walls, an elder asked Ling Han, "Sir, are you friend or foe?" This was a 4th Severance Grand Elder, as well as the present clan leader of the Liu clan, Liu Huashan. Ling Han broke into a smile. "Now that you have a visitor, are you not going to invite me in?" On the city walls, the members of the Liu clan all began to shake their heads. He got to be kidding. Presently, they were still protected by the formation, but once they deactivated it, they would be like an exquisite beauty lying naked in front of a pervert. It would be too dangerous. Before finding out whether Ling Han was friend or foe, they would have to be extremely careful, and definitely could not afford to be careless. Ling Han sighed. The way you treat guests is really too horrible. I want to file a complaint. Sir, if you can help our Lu clan resolve the present predicament, you can ask for whatever you want. Lu Huashan declared, appearing to be very generous. There was no way he could not be generous. That was because under the powerful assault of the Kong clan, they could not last for long, and once the city was breached, all members of the Lu clan, young and old, would be killed. If they were dead, what would be the point of having wealth? If Sir could penetrate the city defenses of the Lu clan, then all the wealth of the Lu clan can be handed over to Sir. On the Kong clan side, an elder also stepped out. Though he was extremely far away, his voice was still clearly transmitted. This was the clan leader of the Kong clan, Kong Zhongjin. Lord Clan Leader, the members of the Kong clan all exclaimed in shock. What, to actually hand over all the wealth of the Lu clan? Then wouldn't the Kong clan have gone to so much trouble for nothing? Yet Kong Zhongjin waved a dismissive hand. These juniors really were short-sighted. The true wealth of the Lu clan lay in their mines and herb gardens. Ling Han could not move these, and even if Kong Zhongjin had presently gotten the upper hand, they would still have to pay a very great price if they wanted to eliminate the Lu clan. Though his words were very generous, he was merely being generous with the wealth of others. Sir! Lu Huashan called out loudly. Sir! Kong Zhongjin also shouted loudly. Now, Ling Han was a variable. His strength was unfathomable, so everyone wanted to snatch him to their side. Who knew, the scales of victory could tilt in favor of one side just because he leaned towards them. Ling Han shook his head, and said, if you are not willing to invite me in, I can only enter by myself. He raised a hand, and pressed down. Wang, a wall of light immediately appeared out of thin air, seals of great Tao flickering. Ling Han stretched out a finger and flicked. Wang, the wall of light trembled slightly like a ripple rising on the surface of water, crystalline waves rising up. What is he doing? Someone asked curiously. He can't be planning to break through the formation by force, right? That is practically a delusion. This is the Dhara subduing formation, capable of stopping even Heaven's soul elites. If that hadn't been the case, we would have long since broken through. We can only use our own formation to break through this formation, and use war machines to slowly wear away at the power of the members of Lu clan so that the great formation would lose its source of power. Though he is very strong, if he can really break through the formation, I will swallow this rock. The members of the Kong clan whispered among themselves, and so did the members of the Lu clan. However, they were even more confident, and thought that as long as there was someone maintaining the formation, then this great formation could never be penetrated. Sir, you don't have to waste your time. There is no possible way you can penetrate the formation, Lu Huashan stated calmly. Ling Han smiled faintly, and channeled the regulation of slaughter. He delivered a stroke of his finger. Pa! The shield of light trembled slightly, and immediately shattered like crystal, turning into countless pieces of crystal that reflected dazzling light. Pooh! Everyone spluttered simultaneously. The formation had really been broken through, and it had only been by a finger at that. What kind of force was this? It was too terrifying and astonishing. However, Ling Han did not take advantage of the opening and enter. Thus, the shield of light was reformed very soon, and enshrouded the town once more. After all, Ling Han had not destroyed the formation, and merely broken through the formation's shield by force. It was like how a person penetrated the defenses of his opponent in a battle between cultivators, but the question of whether he would inflict injury on his opponent would depend on whether he continued to follow up on his assault. Ling Han channeled the regulations of lightning again, and a purple seal immediately appeared in the palm of his hand, flickering with electricity. He stretched out his hand and pressed down lightly on the shield of light. The lightning immediately shot out from the palm of his hand, instantly covering the entire shield of light. The shield of light crumbled immediately, falling in pieces accompanied by the light of electricity. The formation had again been broken. Everyone was once again gaping with open mouths and bulging eyes. He had broken through the formation again, and it was using another method at that. Ling Han still did not take a step. Hence, the shield of light recovered once more. In high spirits, he tried the regulations of space again. With a flash of his figure, he had directly appeared on the other side of the shield of light. Everyone responded, air. Then, he used the 9 heavens flame, Xianin source water, firm essence green gold, and so on. In short, he had used every single one of the 8 source powers of heaven and earth once, and he could easily break through that defense formation each and every time. Everyone was already shocked to numbness. Their mouths twitched madly, yet they could not spit out a single word. This is not very fun. Ling Han shook his head, and finally strode into the small town. Retreat, retreat. Kong Zhongjin said in a quivering voice. This man was terrifyingly powerful, and Kong Zhongjin had actually intended on bargaining with him. He had really been outrageously bold. The members of the Kong clan were already trembling in fear, scared witless. Now that they had gotten the command from their grand elder, they instantly turned around and fled in panic, fearing that Ling Han would suddenly change his mind, and say he wanted to pay a visit to the Kong clan or something. And my lord. The members of the Lu clan could not flee. They could only get off from the city walls, and knelt down to make their salutations to Ling Han. Lu Huashan was the clan leader, after all. Gathering his courage, he asked, "Dare I ask, my lord, why you have come?" Chapter 21-24, Untitled. Ling Han pulled 7th brother forwards, and replied, "Oh, I am here to seek justice." "Seek justice? My lord, dare I ask what offense our clan has committed against you?" Lu Huashan asked cautiously. Ling Han kicked 7th brother, and replied, "Not me, but 2 kids." He related how 7th brother and his party had almost run over the children. Hearing Ling Han finish his tale, every member of the Lu clan bore strange expressions. Fuck, just because of such a minor matter, you actually charged personally to the Lu clan? Wasn't it just 2 mere mortals? Who would care about their life or death? Ling Han swept a glance over the masses, and stated calmly, "I care." Though the members of the Lu clan still thought nothing of it, they did not dare reveal their thoughts in their expressions. "Then dare I ask, my lord, what kind of compensation you wish to seek from us?" Lu Huashan asked. Whatever the case, Ling Han had still resolved the threat of the Kong clan for them, at least for now. That was the case, and Ling Han also had the ability to destroy the Lu clan single-handedly. Thus, the members of the Lu clan naturally dared not show any disrespect towards him at all. This was a demon king. Who knew what kind of terrifying damage would be caused by his thunderous rage? Since you cannot control your own subordinates, then does the Lu clan still have the need to exist? Ling Han asked calmly. You want to destroy our Lu clan? Lu Huashan inhaled sharply. Ling Han shook his head. "I will give you a month's time to disband the Lu clan. Otherwise, I will disband it on your behalf." "My lord, those were just 2 little brats, and our Lu clan would have Ito pay such an exorbitant price for it. This is unjust." Lu Huashan called out loudly, filled with defiance. 1 month. Ling Han did not waste any more words, and merely found a house in the town to stay in. He had deliberately given a time limit of a month. Hi's purpose was not to destroy the Lu clan, but rather to force the Lu clan to continue seeking out the members of the Imperial Void sect. This was an opportunity. He wanted to find his way into the Imperial Void sect. The Imperial Void Celestial King was linked in countless ways with the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable, and it is extremely possible that he was the disciple of the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. To Ling Han, making his way into the Imperial Void sect is not his ultimate motive. What he really wanted to find out about was the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. When the Master of the Black Tower died, did it have any relation with the 3 great heavenly venerates? Ling Han's guess was yes. Otherwise, Why would Small Tower be so incredibly wary about these three great heavenly venerates? Then what was the real truth? Why had the ancient realm been split in two? A heavenly venerate couldn't have possibly done something like that for no fathomable reason, right? The large black dog had once said that the three great heavenly venerates treated the storm of darkness passively. What kind of attitude did these three mighty figures actually maintain? There were a great many matters that he would only find out once he made actual contact. He would use the Lu clan as contact point, and enter into the Imperial Void sect first, and then further enter into the sealed Emotion Palace. Lord Clan Leader, what should we do? The moment Ling Han left, the members of the Lu clan exploded. That guy must be a dividing soul tier, and have astonishing battle prowess to be able to forcibly break through the formation. Even if our strength was multiplied 100-fold over, it would still be useless. Lu Huashan pressed his hands down, and said in displeasure, "What are you panicking about? Don't we still have one last move to make? Xiao Shan, go and pay a personal visit to send the news to the Green Willows City." He looked towards an elder. This was a third Severance Grand Elder of Lu clan, and the second strongest elite aside from him. Lu Xiaoshan hummed and said, "But if I leave, what if the Kong clan comes to attack us again?" WTH, a third Severance Grand Elder drawn away. If the Kong clan came to attack again, the Lu clan would be in danger. It's fine. As long as that bringer of calamity is still here, the Kong clan would definitely not dare to be rash. Lu Huashan appeared to be brimming with confidence. "Clan leader, is that really trustworthy?" someone asked. Lu Huashan nodded, with the ancestral records as proof. "We are indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King. However, it is rather hard to speak about. Our ancestor was birthed from an accident between the 7th-generation grandson of Imperial Void Celestial King with a courtesan." Everyone gave an "oh." No wonder Lu Huashan had previously been so unwilling to speak of the relationship between them and the Imperial Void Celestial King, so that was the case. Indeed, this was really very embarrassing. "All right, I will immediately set out." Lu Xiaoshan nodded. He made a prompt decision, and hurried towards Green Willows City. With his cultivation level, if he exerted all his effort, he would be able to arrive in 11 or 12 days. This was also why Ling Han had given the time limit of a month. After Lu Xiaoshan arrived, he immediately used the summoning formation there to obtain contact with the Imperial Void sect. Originally, with his status, there was no possible way that he would be able to gain contact. However, he clarified his identity at the first moment, and the other would rather believe it to be truth than not, and thus helped him to find a powerful figure of the sect. The message was passed through multiple levels, and verified repeatedly. In a mere 3 days, the identity of the Lu clan was confirmed. They were indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King, but their bloodline was already extremely and boundlessly distant. However, the descendants of a celestial king were still the descendants of a celestial king. How could they be allowed to be slighted? There is actually such an arrogant person. I really would like to see him for myself. When they were in the midst of discussion whom they should send, a man dressed in green robes spoke you. He looked extremely young, yet had an overbearing air, as if even celestial kings would have to grovel in front of him. Yulan Fenghua, the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King, and also his most beloved divided soul. At present, his cultivation level was Earth Soul, and was a monarch among monarchs. It is said that he has inherited some portion of the graceful bearing of the Imperial Void Celestial King when he was young. Holy Son Yulan, there is absolutely no need for you to go, is there? Someone hurriedly advised. Though Yulan Fenghua's cultivation level was not very high, because he was too favored by the Imperial Void Celestial King, even a first heaven or second heaven Celestial King would have to give him some face. He was too important. If anything happened to him, the Imperial Void Celestial King would definitely fly into a thunderous rage, and no one would be able to bear that kind of consequences. It's fine. He can only be a heaven soul, at most, Yulan Fenghua stated carelessly. Though he was only an earth soul, he had defeated even Heaven's Soul monarch tiers before. It could be said that any dividing soul tier would only be an ant in his eyes. Because he was not only the Imperial Void Celestial King's disciple, he had also obtained personal guidance from the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. That was a Heavenly Venerable tier. What kind of character was that? Reigning supreme over the heaven and earth, he naturally could make him so strong that even monarch tiers could only feel despair. He did not believe that Ling Han was capable of matching him. It was just a spontaneous impulse that gave him the idea of making this trip. The moment that Yulan Fenghua had decided, aside from the Imperial Void Celestial King, no other person could make him change his mind. All right, then Holy Son Yulan will set out. Yulan Fenghua set out. He had a flight device, which the Imperial Void Celestial King had personally strengthened with regulations of the Great Tao. Its speed of flight was astonishingly fast, and in a mere 3 days, he had arrived at the Green Willow City from a boundlessly far location. He contacted Lu Huashan, and they returned together to the Lu clan. When he got the news, Lu Huashan immediately appeared together with the important figures of the clan, to receive the arrival of Yulan Fenghua. Welcome, Lord Holy Son. The members of the Lord all paid their greetings respectfully. Though they were the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King, their bloodline was too distant. Furthermore, they were birthed by a courtesan, so they naturally had even less confidence. Yulan Fenghua was completely unconcerned. He had seen this kind of scene too many times, and it was absolutely impossible to make him feel any kind of feeling of superiority anymore. He nodded casually, and said, "Where is that arrogant man? Let me lead the way." Lu Huashan hurriedly proclaimed. Led by Lu Huashan, the members of the Lu clan all followed, and charged grandly to where Ling Han was presently staying. He actually dared to threaten the Lu clan? Fuck, let's see if we won't kill you be at starred. Chapter 21-25, Overlord of Monarch Tiers. Though the town was big, everyone was still severing mundane tier elites. Thus, in less than 7 or 8 minutes, everyone had arrived at the first level of the house Ling Han was staying in. This was a 3-story tall building, and Ling Han was staying on the 3rd floor. "You insolent madman, scram out immediately," the members of the Lu clan immediately shouted. By now, they were filled with confidence. The limit of a month has not arrived yet, and you people have already settled your matters? Ling Han's voice rang out from upstairs. You're dreaming. Today is the day that you deliver up your head. Hurry and get down to pay your greetings to Lord Holy Sun. The members of the Lu clan all demanded at once. Holy Sun? Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had actually drawn out a Holy Sun of the Imperial Void sect. It looked like the Lu clan was still quite important. He opened the window, and swept a glance over the gathered masses. Immediately, he focused on Yulan Fenghua. Such a man that seemed to possess his own halo would be like a crane in a flock of chickens wherever he was, incredibly striking to the eye. Yulan Fenghua also looked towards Ling Han, his gaze slightly flickering, and revealing a hint of surprise. He could actually feel a coldness from Ling Han, causing him to feel a slight stab of pain, as if he had encountered a strong enemy. Was this possible? Who was he? Monarch of monarchs, the disciple of Imperial Void Celestial King, the grand disciple of the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. With such a prestigious identity, who else could compare to him in this world? Could it be that the other was a top-grade Heaven Soul Monarch tier? That had to be the case. Come down, kneel and cripple your limbs, and I will spare your life, he stated calmly. Even if he felt pressure, he was still filled with confidence in himself, and thought that if they were really going to battle, he would definitely still be the ultimate victor. To defeat an opponent stronger than him was something he was an expert in. It was also a tag that was attached to him, a dazzling halo of light. Ling Han chuckled, and then spat out, "Idiot." Idiot? Yulan Fenghua was slightly startled, and then a shock filled with absolute disbelief rose up in him. Was this really a monarch tier? To actually speak in such an unreserved manner, this was practically disgraceful. Involuntarily, he clenched his fists. The self-control that he had always taken pride in seemed to easily collapse in front of Ling Han. He took a few deep breaths, and only then did he suppress his fury. The pride of our Imperial Void sect cannot be trampled on by anyone. Since you refuse to take the way out that I have already offered to you, I can only send you on your way to the underworld. Where does your confidence come from? Ling Han bit into a crisp apple, appearing incredibly casual. What I enjoy the most is stepping on those so-called prodigies. You seem to have an itch, so are you asking to be beaten? You're seeking death. Yulan Fenghua exclaimed lightly. His figure rose into the air, and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han's right hand clenched into a fist, and delivered a punch at Yulan Fenghua. Peng, the two men each launched a blow. Instantly, origin power clashed first, forming a contention of power. Boundless regulations surged, turning into indestructible blades. Peng, 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 all objects in their surroundings were instantly rendered into scraps. Because Ling Han had moved in, the surrounding residents had long since moved out, but there were still a great many people that had come with Yulan Fenghua. Swept by these sharp blades, many were immediately killed. Lu Huashan couldn't help but shiver, his face twitching madly. They were done for, done for. Those that were qualified to come were the pillars of support of the clan, and now practically more than half of them had been eliminated with a single clash. To the Lu clan, this was a severe hit, and they might not be able to recover from this kind of damage even in several 100 million years. Why was this still the result when Yulan Fenghua had come? This time, Yulan Fenghua was really surprised. Ling Han was actually Yin's soul tier, a minor level lower than himself even. Impossible. His opponent's cultivation level was lower than his own, yet the other party could actually exude such intimidating pressure, and made him feel as if he was facing a powerful foe. In fact, he even managed to sustain a blow from him. How could there be such a freak? I am Yulan Fenghua, he announced in a deep voice. He did not even spare a glance at the members of Lu clan, who had been implicated in the shock wave, and were looking at him. The Imperial Void Celestial King really had too many descendants, and facing such existences whose bloodline was so distant that it was practically negligible, and who had such lowly origins, there was naturally no need to be overly concerned about their life or death. Ling Han calmly stated, a hint of seriousness flashing through his gaze. The pressure that Yulan Fenghua gave him was not inferior to what he felt from Ji Wuming. However, Yulan Fenghua was an earth soul, a minor level higher than Ling Han. With such a comparison, it could be seen that Yulan Fenghua was inferior to Ji Wuming. True, Ji Wuming was a ninth heaven celestial king that had reincarnated and was recultivating. Aside from a person like Ling Han who was blessed by heaven, how could others compare? Ling Han? Ling Han? Yulan Fenghua murmured a few times. I will remember that. No need, no need. Ling Han hurriedly waved a hand. I do not have the habit of being remembered by men. Cheeky mouth. Yulan Fenghua's expression darkened. He raised his right hand, and gripped the empty air, as if there was something solid in his hand. Then, he began to drag from his left hand to his right hand, and a transparent sword appeared out of thin air. If you can block 100 moves from me, I'll spare your life, he declared. Though Ling Han had managed to block a blow from Yulan Fenghua, the latter was still filled with an absolute confidence in victory and himself. However, he still did not dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest, and summoned his own pseudo-celestial tool. Otherwise, he did not have the confidence that he could kill Ling Han in 100 moves. Then, I'll play with you. Ling Han felt a thrill. He, too, wanted to know what extent his present battle prowess had reached. Kill. Yulan Fenghua's figure pounced, and in a flash, it was 3 divided souls charging out together. They charged to assault Ling Han from 3 sides, while the original was brandishing the pseudo-celestial tool in a slash towards Ling Han. There were just 4 of them, yet possessed an imposing aura as if not even a magnificent army could compare. Any one of them could easily pierce a hole in the dome of heaven, and dictate the heaven and earth. Ling Han did not use his divided souls, but rather drew the divine demon sword, and charged towards Yulan Fenghua. Arrogance. Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. The other man wanted to oppose him without using his divided souls? The four of him were one and the same, and launched a mad offensive towards Ling Han simultaneously. Pung! 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 The careless shock waves produced from their clashes could cause massive damage. Before even 10 moves had lapsed, the small town of the Lu clan had already been completely destroyed. Not only had the foundations completely vanished, even a deep layer of the land had been scraped away, turning into a large lake. Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua were battling intensely above this lake. Ling Han channeled various source powers, but not only was he unable to suppress Yulan Fenghua, he was beaten into continuous retreat, and had fallen into a disadvantage. Strong, he was really strong. He had no choice but to summon his two divided souls to join the battle, or he would really be no match for Yulan Fenghua. The two great young prodigies were all exerting their full efforts. Every blow was capable of rendering the sun dim and lightless, causing even the stars to lose their color. Yulan Fenghua's expression was slightly ugly. He actually only managed to battle Ling Han to a tie. To say nothing of the fact he still had a superior advantage of a minor level, even if both their cultivation levels were equal, this was still something he could not accept. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he should be absolutely invincible. It's about close to 300 moves, right? Ling Han asked casually. Previously, Yulan Fenghua had made a promise of defeating Ling Han within 100 moves. Yulan Fenghua did not utter a word. He was now truly angered. Even if he could not kill Ling Han, he still wanted to defeat Ling Han. Otherwise, his pride would not allow it. Heavenly Pillar, he shouted lightly, and made a pulling movement. Suddenly, a transparent, crystal-like pillar descended from the heavens, pressing down on Ling Han. Huh! Ling Han shockingly discovered that his body could no longer move. Chapter 21-26, Arrangements. This was a spatial restraint. Before the Celestial King tier, the regulations of space were superior to the 5 elements, and most people cultivated the 5 elements. Thus, anyone who cultivated the regulations of space would be superior to others by nature. Yulan Fenghua showed a hint of arrogance. This was the secret technique unique to the Imperial Void Celestial King. Among the Imperial Void Celestial King's 9 disciples, he was the only one who had grasped this secret technique. Beneath the heavenly pillar, Ling Han's limbs would be restrained, as if he was suppressed by the pillar of heaven. Boom! He sent out a palm strike directly at Ling Han's chest. If this blow landed, Ling Han would definitely sustain serious injury. However, Yulan Fenghua had deliberately avoided his mind, which could be considered as having fulfilled his previous promise. As long as Ling Han could survive 100 moves from him, he would spare Ling Han's life. Ling Han smiled faintly. Wang, the space around him warped, as if countless mirrors had come to being. Ling Han's image could be seen everywhere. You can use regulations of space, and you think I can't? Yulan Fenghua immediately came to an abrupt stop. That was because he could not distinguish which was the real Ling Han at all. All of them exuded an aura that made it seem like they were the real one, but how could so many true selves exist? So they had to be false. Then, where was the real one? Great spatial cut. He was only taken aback for a moment, and then immediately used another celestial technique. The pseudo-celestial tool in his hold glowed, and sent out a streak of light that was 30,000 meters long, slashing out at his surroundings. Instantly, the space was shattered. Those images of Ling Han also shattered into pieces. Finally, Ling Han's true self appeared. He was standing in the air 300 meters away, and his two divided souls stood beside him. Yulan Fenghua stood, sword in hand. You are indeed very strong, but definitely no match for me. Where does your confidence come from? Ling Han asked smilingly. He had not used Great Clash of Source powers. He was sure that if he used this move, even if Yulan Fenghua did not die, he would definitely not dare to take a second attack from him. That is because I really am that strong. Yulan Fenghua declared proudly, pressing out his left hand at Ling Han. Chang, multiple divine chains of regulations shot out, turning into a web that sealed off all paths of retreat for Ling Han. Ling Han also pressed out his left hand, the regulation of slaughter activating. Sword Qi danced wildly, slashing the divine chains of regulations that Yulan Fenghua had shot out into bits. He launched an offensive, and the heaven-destroying 9 swords was used, its vicious might soaring sky-high. Pung! 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 Wang! 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 The 2 great prodigies clashed, and one celestial technique after another was cast. The explosive tension became heavier and heavier, and the might of their secret techniques also became stronger and stronger. All prodigies were proud, especially for overlords of monarch tiers like them. If their cultivation levels were close, then they would definitely want to win, and Yulan Fenghua's pressure was clearly heavier because he had the advantage of a minor level over Ling Han. Even if Ling Han forced him to a tie, he could not accept it either. Otherwise, how could he bring himself to face others in future? Unleashing a battle cry, his whole person became ethereal. One after another, spatial spikes shot out from his body. Each one was the overwhelming blow of the pinnacle of Heaven's soul, and it was guaranteed that even a Heaven's soul monarch tier would be incredibly troubled by this. Ling Han had no wish to easily expose the secret of the toughness of his physique. Thus, he also used regulations of space, and manifested thousands of himself. No matter how strong your attack was, so what? If it could not hit me, it was completely useless. The 2 prodigies were continuously and endlessly battling intensely like that. Sometimes, it would be Ling Han beating down on Yulan Fenghua, while at other times, it was Yulan Fenghua instead that was suppressing Ling Han. Offensive and defensive switched from one side to the other at a shocking speed, and neither of them could truly claim the upper hand. Ha 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 ha. Yulan Fenghua suddenly laughed loudly. He took the initiative to stop and said, "Your strength is close to mine, and it would be meaningless for us to continue fighting. Why don't we call a ceasefire now?" "Sure." Ling Han nodded. All that he had done was merely to make his way into the Imperial Void sect, so he naturally wouldn't really battle Yulan Fenghua to the death. If he was really serious, he would have used the Great Clash of Source powers. The destructive power of that was enough to destroy the heavens and earth, and was even capable of blasting a hole through the void. Come, Brother Han, let us have a nice chat." Yulan Fenghua pulled on Ling Han's hand, presenting an image of good friends and brothers. All the members of the Lu clan exchanged looks. They were done just like that? Hadn't he said that he would kill Ling Han? And now, the Lu clan was already razed to the ground, with many of their members dead. Whom were they going to seek justice from? But Yulan Fenghua was the holy son of the Imperial Void sect, while they were only the descendants of a courtesan. How could they compare? Furthermore, the gap in power was practically the difference between heaven and earth, so they had best just keep quiet. Who knew, they might even anger Yulan Fenghua into eliminating them. Yulan Fenghua was smiling very brightly on the surface, but killing intent was already shifting quietly in his heart. He could do nothing against Ling Han, but he was also sure that Ling Han could not do anything to him. However, Ling Han was inferior to him by a minor level. Thus, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, he was definitely no match for Ling Han. Which also meant that the latter was even more freakishly genius than himself. He definitely could not allow this kind of prodigy to exist in his eyes, and he was determined to eliminate him. Thus, he had to appease Ling Han first, and then set up some arrangements to get rid of Ling Han. Someone that was even more freakish than himself could not be allowed to exist in this world, at least not someone without any kind of background like Ling Han. He had already left the Lu clan town with Ling Han, though it had already been razed to the ground. Then, they found a restaurant, sat facing each other, and began to talk. Yulan Fenghua was trying to worm info out of Ling Han, and Ling Han was attempting the same thing. Yulan Fenghua wanted to know of Ling Han's origins. If this guy was connected to a ninth heaven celestial king or even heavenly venerable tier, then even he would not dare to act recklessly. And Ling Han wanted to know more about the Imperial Void sect, so there was naturally no simpler, more direct means than asking the Holy Son of the Imperial Void sect. Additionally, Ling Han also wanted to know which heavenly realm he was in. If he were to ask directly, others would probably laugh themselves to death. You didn't even know where you yourself were? After talking for a long time, the two of them finally gained some information that they each needed. Yulan Fenghua had confirmed that Ling Han did not come from any kind of powerful background, but was truly very talented and had extremely good luck, while Ling Han also found out some facts about the Imperial Void sect. At least, he found out which heavenly realm he was currently in. 10,000 Splendors Heaven, which lay adjacent to the Rock Heaven. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, he had not been diverted too far away. Brother Ling, are you interested in paying a visit to the Imperial Void sect? Yulan Fenghua offered an invitation to Ling Han. With your natural talent, Brother Ling, my master may also appreciate you, and might even take you in as a disciple. Here it comes. Ling Han was not willing to believe that the other man would really be so kind. Instead, he only wished to deceive him into entering the Imperial Void sect. By then, with Yulan Fenghua's status, it would be extremely easy for him to kill him secretly with a trap. However, this fell in line with Ling Han's own plans. He wanted to enter into the Imperial Void sect, and finally enter into the sealed emotion palace with that as his stepping stone. However, it was not now. I still have some private matters to settle, so maybe a while later, Ling Han replied. He wanted to go to the Rock Palace first. That could no longer wait. When? Yulan Fenghua asked, unwilling to resign. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, we'll set the time at 100 years from now, then. All right, then I will wait for Brother Ling's arrival at the Imperial Void sect. Yulan Fenghua was not the type to worry about his gains and losses. Immediately, he clapped his hands. To Celestials, 100 years' time would pass practically with a snap of the fingers. Ling Han nodded, and said, I will take my leave. Please. Yulan Fenghua stood up to send him off. Ling Han had already achieved his goal for this trip, so he naturally would not loiter around much longer. His only purpose for deliberately taking this detour was the Imperial Void sect. You have to consider seriously, Small Tower spoke up suddenly. Chapter 21-27, Besieged. What do you mean? Ling Han asked. The Imperial Void Celestial King is no ordinary ninth heaven celestial king. His strength is unfathomable, and is just a thread's breadth away from heavenly venerable tier, Small Tower said solemnly. If he was given a few more epochs, he may really be able to break the great limits of heaven and earth, and successfully attain heavenly venerable tier. If he gets curious about you, there is no way you would be able to keep any secrets. Ling Han nodded, and replied, it's fine. It's just an idea in my head for now. It's not like I am so determined to go. However, could it be that there is no way that I could fool the eyes of a ninth heaven celestial king, or even a heavenly venerate? If the one he was talking to was not Small Tower, it would be absolutely impossible for Ling Han to voice out such a question. To fool the eyes of a ninth heaven celestial king, or even a heavenly venerate? Was he joking? However, Small Tower was a heavenly venerable tier tool, so perhaps there was indeed some way possible. Small Tower paused, and after a while, it finally said, there is a secret technique in the Heavenly Saint Palace that can fool the heavens and earth, and coordinating with your power of the 5 element source powers, it should be possible for you to temporarily deceive a ninth heaven celestial king. However, if the Imperial Void Celestial King observes you carefully, don't even think of hiding anything. Don't you even think about Heavenly Venerable Tier. This has surpassed the regulations of heaven and earth, and has touched directly on essence. Ling Han nodded. Apparently, he really needed to make a trip to the Heavenly Saint Palace, and he could just see his son while he was at it. Who knew if this silly brat was still being imprisoned? He set out towards the rock heaven, his speed becoming faster and faster. Too many years had passed. He longed to see his parents and lovers again. Such thoughts became increasingly urgent and pressing. Now that he had grasped the powerful regulations of space, he used the void space, and pushed his speed to the pinnacle. 2 months later, he entered the rock heaven. It could not be helped. Even if his present speed had reached the pinnacle, that was still only the pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Any immortal palace tier would be able to easily crush him. It was only 2 months, and this was already very, very fast. After entering the rock heaven, he would occasionally see manifestations of chi forming multiple images of the rock in the air. However, he quickly saw arrows shoot from the ground and destroy these manifestations. At first, Ling Han thought this was only a random phenomenon, but after several times of the same thing happening, Ling Han finally realized that something was off. Xiao, another sharp arrow shot out, and shattered the chi of the rock. Ling Han immediately flew, descending down towards where the sharp arrow had shot out from. His figure descended, and saw that a middle-aged man was just presently withdrawing the giant bow he was holding. It was dark green in color, and even taller than the archer. "Brat, what are you looking at?" This middle-aged man tossed a glare at him, multiple great stars appearing in his pupils, and exuding a frightening aura. This was an immortal palace tier grade elite. Ling Han clasped his fists together in greeting, and said, "This junior just happened to pass by, and coincidentally saw senior use your powerful technique." The arrow furiously shot through the skies, possessing boundless dominance. "I have thus deliberately come over, wishing to admire senior's graceful bearing." He could speak in a very caustic manner, causing others to stomp in fury, but at the same time, he could also speak in a way that made others feel very pleased and comfortable. This middle-aged man was very pleased by this compliment, and couldn't help but laugh loudly as he said, "That's right. I am renowned as the ultimate shot. 1 man and 1 arrow, and I can stop thousands of soldiers and horses in their tracks." He had been dispatched to stand guard here. It was actually quite boring, and he just happened to encounter someone who admired him. Thus, even if this was only a junior, he could still help him pass some time. "Is senior here to hunt immortal beasts?" Ling Han feigned ignorance. "Hee, you don't understand." The middle-aged man shook his head. "What I shot down earlier is called rock chi. According to legend, when the heaven and earth first split, the source beast, the rock, was born here. Thus, even if the rock has long since died, there would still be rock chi gushing out here. What is the use of it?" Ling Han still pretended to be very foolish and naive. The middle-aged man wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He glanced at Ling Han, and then clapped his head, saying, "If you were a woman, would have suspected your motives. However, the Rock Palace does not accept male disciples, so you must have no relation with the Rock Palace. There is no harm telling you. Our 4 Seas Palace is presently besieging the Rock Palace, and destroying these rock chi is my mission. That can sever the source of power for the Rock Palace, and can also sever their fortune as well." The Rock Palace was a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force. The fact that the middle-aged man could personally come and participate in the battle to obliterate the Rock Palace would become something that he could be proud of in the future, and he would be able to boast about it for the rest of his life. The Rock Palace's circumstances had already deteriorated to this extent. Their enemies were already here destroying rock chi without the slightest reservations, which was equivalent to leaping on their heads, but the Rock Palace could not do anything about it. The circumstances were really extremely horrible. Ling Han continued trying to worm information out from the middle-aged man, and the latter was, firstly, bored, and secondly, did not suspect any ulterior motives and thought that since Ling Han was a man, he had to be unrelated to the Rock Palace. As long as it was nothing that touched on the top secrets of the Rock Palace, he just talked to his heart's content. However, even if he wanted to leak out those secrets, it would be impossible. Immortal Palace tiers could be considered elite in a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force, but it was absolutely impossible for them to be involved in any top secret matters. After chatting for a long time, Ling Han wanted to leave, but the middle-aged man still persistently held on to him, and talked about his past glories. His interest in talking was very high, and he talked for over 2 days. Only then was the middle-aged man finally willing to let Ling Han leave. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. He had actually encountered a chatterbox. The Rock Palace was naturally highly renowned in the Rock Heaven. Ling Han only had to make some casual inquiries, and easily found out the way to the Rock Palace. After about a month, he finally arrived at the foot of the mountain beneath the Rock Palace. On his way here, he had also seen a great many people who were shattering rock chi like the middle-aged man, showing that the Rock Palace's present situation was really one of great peril. Ling Han did not directly ascend the mountain, because he couldn't. There was presently an army that was unleashing a fierce offensive at the mountain entrance. He was initially stunned, but then relaxed because these troops were not powerful. The strongest among them was only at the ascending origin tier. Was an ascending origin tier not strong enough? In other forces, an ascending origin tier was indeed strong, and overwhelmingly strong at that. However, both the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace were 9th Heaven Celestial King tier forces. Celestial Kings numbered in the hundreds, and ascending origin tier really could not be considered all that powerful. Thus, this was only a clash of ascending origin tier against ascending origin tier, which meant that this was just a small-scale skirmish, and neither side had gotten really serious yet. True enough, this battle only lasted 3 days before ending, and both sides withdrew their own troops. Ling Han still could not pass, because the Four Seas Palace had sealed off the path of entry into the Rock Palace. Neither exit nor entry was possible. Previously, hearing the situation that Hu Niu had described, the circumstances had not been as grim as this. Though the Four Seas Palace had penetrated into the Rock Heaven, it had not reached the extent that their swords were aimed directly at their main doors, but now it looked like they were close to eliminating the Rock Palace in a single move. What to do now? Ling Han thought for a moment, and came up with an idea. When the Four Seas Palace launched an offensive the next time, he would pretend to be a soldier on the side of the Four Seas Palace and sneak in. After he had rushed out of the area the Four Seas Palace had sealed off, he would then reveal his true identity, and then he would be able to enter into the Rock Palace. But in that way, if he wanted to leave, his path would be paved with great difficulty. He had already exposed his face. If he wanted to come back out again, would the Four Seas Palace easily let him pass? Who cared? He would just enter first, and then think about other things later. He waited patiently, and a mere 7 days later, the Four Seas Palace once again released a new wave of attacks. Charge! Ling Han called out loudly, mingling with the troops of the Four Seas Palace. In any case, he was a man, so there would definitely be no one who would suspect that he was on the side of the Rock Palace. Chapter 21-28, Looking for Someone Familiar. This was yet another small-scale skirmish. Ascending Origin tier elites would deliver a token assault, an Immortal Palace tier, dividing Soul tier, and severing Mundane tier Celestials would be tailing behind them. However, there was an extremely large number of troops, displaying the detailed power of a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier level force. Ling Han ran with the masses, calling out loudly a few times. Seeing the exaggerated expression on his face, others would think that he had some kind of deadly grudge against the Rock Palace. Brother, we are just cannon fodder, and this is above our pay grade. You don't have to be so serious, right? Someone by his side could not bear to watch. How were they supposed to live with that? Really? Ling Han chuckled. My mistake, my mistake. I overperformed. That's right. As the saying goes, the hunter will shoot the bird that sticks out. With you shouting and howling like this, if you were spotted by those damn women from the Rock Palace, they may lock onto you and hunt you down. Do you think that you are as strong as a dividing soul tier? This person was well aware of the pros and cons. Ling Han's purpose was actually just to attract the attention of those damn women. There were a great many people that had welcomed Hunyo back to the celestial realm. Only one of them needed to appear, and they would definitely be able to recognize him. Thus, he only kept a low profile for a while, and then immediately became energetic again, yelling and shouting loudly. The troops of both sides rapidly closed in on each other, and then erupted in a great battle. Basically, this kind of battle would take place in the air. Usually, Ascending Origin tiers would battle fiercely at the highest point, and then Immortal Palace tiers would be at a slightly lower point, followed by Dividing Soul tiers, and finally it would be Severing Mundane tiers at the lowest point. Basically, that was at a point that was just a few dozen meters above the ground. The environment here was extremely sturdy. Thus, even if a maximum-scale battle royale broke out here, it would still be unable to crumble the mountains. Otherwise, this place would have long since been flattened. Die, you villain. A woman from the Rock Palace had locked on Ling Han, a pair of wings flapping behind her back as she rapidly charged over towards Ling Han. Celestials could fly, and after she possessed this pair of wings, her speed had also considerably soared. Practically in just the blink of an eye, she had appeared in front of Ling Han, her sword waving out in a sweeping slash. Those with the bloodline of the rock were naturally experts of regulations of space. Ling Han had no intention of exposing himself. Thus, he merely condensed his origin power on his fist, and parried this strike. Peng, the two of them were sent flying backwards. Ling Han had naturally faked it. His figure turned, and charged towards another place, searching for a familiar face with his memory, even if 10 million years had passed, including the time spent in the Black Tower. Everything that had happened in the small world all those years ago were still vivid in his mind. As long as it was someone that had appeared then, he would definitely be able to recognize her. Don't even think of fleeing. He had not foreseen that that woman was extremely stubborn. Wielding her sword, she pursued him. She probably had seen how Ling Han had pushed his performance too far, and developed animosity towards him. Ling Han laughed, and naturally would not stop. Instead, he ran even faster. Just at this moment, a powerful feeling of danger rose up in him suddenly. He hurriedly stopped, and retreated madly. As expected, a gaze had focused on him. That was an Immortal Palace tier elite, who had especially descended downwards to kill such weaklings like himself. Just now, if Ling Han had not retreated backwards decisively, he would have probably suffered a powerful attack from the former. Watch the sword. The woman from before pursued him, her sword stabbing straight at the back of Ling Han's head. Ling Han parried carelessly, pretending to be stuck in a stalemate with the other in battle. Then, he guided the fight to circle around the battlefield endlessly as he continued to look for someone familiar. Brother, let's work together to kill her. Coincidentally, the person that had reminded Ling Han not to overperform actually charged over, his hands wielding a golden saber, 7 seals of great Tao already glowing on it, and endlessly exuding an aura of violence. His face was filled with killing intent as he brandished his saber in a slash towards that woman. How underhanded, the woman rebuked. She could only turn around and tap out a finger. A rock flew out, greeting the incoming blow from the golden saber. Peng, the rock crashed into the golden saber, instantly causing a burning light to erupt. Seals of great Tao rose up one after another, and a fierce collision took place. Then, they cancelled each other out. Her figure trembled, and then 4 divided souls came out, boosting her battle prowess to the pinnacle. Ling Han had no intention of lingering in battle, and guided the battle into movement. This scene looked a little strange. It was clear that he together with the other person had the advantage in numbers, and this person was not weaker than the woman, yet it was he that was fleeing in panic and the woman that was chasing him, while his companion pursued that woman. "Brother, what are you running for?" The person pursuing behind the woman could not help but call out. "Fuck, you idiot." Ling Han cursed in his heart. This scene composed of the three of them was clearly off. It would be fine if you did not shout, but if you did, what were they supposed to do if they attracted the attention of others? It should be known that Ling Han had a halo of attracting trouble. Usually, even when he did not cause trouble, trouble would still come to him, so what more now? As expected, the eyes of an elite very quickly swept over, as sharp as a blade, causing Ling Han's skin to feel as if it was pricked. This was an immortal palace tier. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This immortal palace tier elite had clearly become suspicious. Even if he did not suspect that Ling Han was a spy, he would think that Ling Han had cowered, and planned to become a deserter. How would a deserter end up on the battlefield? There was a 99% chance they would be killed in front of the troops as an example to the rest and to stabilize the military morale. Ling Han was exasperated, and could only turn around to battle the woman. That immortal palace tier elite himself was still battling furiously, but a sliver of divine sense was tagged onto Ling Han. Probably, he would kill Ling Han first at all costs if Ling Han continued to be passive in battle. Immediately, the woman from the Rock Palace fell into a disadvantage, her circumstances precarious. Killing a dividing soul tier would mean 10 merit points, that companion of Ling Han declared, slightly excited. Clearly, while these 10 merit points were not a high reward, they seemed to be quite valuable. And that woman just hated Ling Han to death, so the focus of her assault concentrated on Ling Han, seeming like she was going to drag Ling Han down with her even if it meant her own death. Ling Han couldn't help but feel speechless. He had not unleashed even 10,000th of his own strength. Even if he did not fight back at all, his physique was nothing that the woman could penetrate anyways, so why go to all the trouble? He could not say these words directly, so he could only listlessly parry her blows. As long as that immortal palace tier no longer paid any attention to him, he would continue his search. But the circumstances of that woman from the Rock Palace were becoming more and more dangerous. She had already been struck a considerable number of times by the golden saber, her body covered with wounds, and her aura had also begun to become unstable. "Brother, I won't be reserved then." Ling Han's companion's eyes shone with vicious light, his saber slashing out at that woman's neck. He had the confidence that her head would be severed with this one slash, and when the power of regulation infiltrated her body, this enemy would instantly die. He was the one who had delivered the finishing blow, so the credit would naturally go to him. That woman could no longer dodge. She was harsh on herself as well. Instead of dodging, wielder and sword moved as one, increasing her speed as she stabbed towards Ling Han. What kind of brain did she have? Ling Han shook his head, stretching out his right hand, and picking her up by the back of her neck. Then, with a clap of his left hand, pang, the golden saber that was delivering a slash from behind was sent flying. Brother? The person from Four Seas Palace looked at Ling Han in shock, his mouth twitching slightly. How could this guy be so strong? But why had he been running all the time previously? It was clear that he could have easily settled the battle just by turning around, right? And he had tried to snatch his credit, so would he then hold a grudge against him? Who exactly was he? Chapter 21-29, Intervention of a Powerful Figure. Ling Han broke into a smile. Sorry. He waved his hand again, and pang, that person from Four Seas Palace was sent flying with a strike, shooting through the air like a kite that had its line cut, and drawing out an elegant arc before finally dropping. He had not been too heavy-handed. Thus, that person soon scrambled back to his feet, his expression completely gobsmacked. You depraved villain, what are you trying to do? The woman that he had grabbed exclaimed loudly. This man had already injured his companion just to grab hold of her. Then, what kind of beastly acts did he plan to do to her? Don't worry. With your looks, you are very safe. I won't do anything to you, Ling Han said carelessly, and then broke out into a mad run. That immortal palace tier elite had been keeping an eye on him all this while, and now that he had suddenly turned traitor, he naturally would fly into a thunderous rage and make a move. As expected, that elite was just about to throw off his own opponent, and make a move on Ling Han. But the Rock Palace elite's strength was extraordinary as well, keeping him entangled tightly in battle, leaving him no means of escape. Humph. The elite smirked coldly. Did he think that he could not do anything like this? He got a hand free, and tapped out a finger towards Ling Han. Ultimate celestial tap, he stated softly. Xiao, a streak of light shot rapidly towards Ling Han. This was a celestial technique that had been delivered from an immortal palace tier. It was definitely capable of insta-killing any dividing soul tier. Naturally, the Rock Palace elite that was fighting him could not possibly rescue an enemy. In any case, it was just a case of internal strife on the enemy side, so what did it have to do with her? She only sped up her attack, wanting to kill this powerful foe. Wang, a streak of light approached. This was the attack of an immortal palace tier. Even if it was not a full-powered blow, it was definitely not anything that a dividing soul tier could withstand. This light was like a fierce wave of obliteration. Fuck. Ling Han raised his hand and tossed the Rock Palace woman in his hands away, taking this attack on alone. Boom, a terrifying celestial light surged past. To a dividing soul tier, this was definitely fatal, and instantly submerged Ling Han within its light. The Rock Palace woman couldn't help but be dumbfounded with shock. In this kind of a situation, Ling Han had still thrown her away, and would rather die alone. What kind of true affection was this? Could it be that this was true love? She had not even finished the thought when the celestial light dispersed. Ling Han was standing there, completely unscathed, and merely a trace of blood was left at the corner of his lips. He didn't die? Involuntarily, she was shocked. That was the blow of an immortal palace tier, but Ling Han actually just bled a little from the corners of his mouth. What kind of frightening defense was this? Ling Han rubbed the corners of his lips. Just now, he had taken the initiative to channel the indestructible heaven scroll, further improving the strength of his physique greatly. Even an immortal palace tier could not possibly kill him with a single blow. However, immortal palace tier was still immortal palace tier, after all. Ling Han was still in great pain all over his body, his organs practically close to exploding and shooting out from his body. As he saw it, this was very natural. In the first place, his physique was capable of ignoring any heaven soul level attack, so if he further channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, he would be able to temporarily further improve his defenses greatly. Thus, wasn't it very normal that he would be able to block the attack of an immortal palace tier? However, anyone who witnessed this scene all showed expressions of astonishment, involuntarily stopping their movements. The impact of this scene was really too great. Why has the fighting stopped? Someone was still brandishing his weapon madly, but no one attacked him even after a long while, causing him to feel completely baffled. Even Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier elites had noticed, especially Ascending Origin tier elites. Their divine sense was too sensitive. All this while, this battlefield was grasped in the palms of their hands. If their side lost, they would withdraw their troops as soon as possible to prevent overly excessive losses. Interesting, an Ascending Origin tier spoke up, and then stretched out a hand suddenly, grabbing out at Ling Han. This kind of elite was really frightening. His hand had just moved, and it had already appeared in front of Ling Han out of nowhere, grabbing downwards at him. Humph. There was no need for Ling Han to dodge. Yet another large hand struck out, and attacked the first giant hand. Boom, a third giant hand attacked, and then it was a fourth, then a fifth. It was like Ling Han had suddenly become an ultimate treasure. Everyone wanted to capture him. Indeed, the fact that a dividing soul tier managed to block the blow of an immortal palace tier was too astonishing. Anyone would feel curious. Ling Han. An incredibly crisp voice rang out, and a figure suddenly shot out from the mountains. It was Hunyo. "Little mistress, behave yourself." A large hand stretched out, and grabbed hold of Hunyo, forcibly pulling her back. However, very quickly afterwards, this large hand extended once more, and appeared directly in front of Ling Han, completely ignoring all laws of space. "Long Yueshi, aren't you dead yet?" A soft exclamation sounded, and another large hand appeared, arriving in a sweep. Compared to the first giant hand that was wrinkled all over, the second giant hand was much better looking, smooth as jade and shining with a soft luster. While it looked delicate, it had a kind of nobility and grace in its delicate appearance. Pa! The two giant hands crashed together, and an intense collision immediately erupted in the regulations of the Great Tao. Endless celestial light filled the heavens, and even those stars in the skies had completely lost their color in this brilliance. Pa, 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 pa. Everyone knelt down. Aside from Ling Han, no one could be the exception. This was a suppression on the level of essence. It was like they were facing the heaven and earth, and did not have the slightest sliver of ability to resist. A celestial king had moved. A massive power rippled out, and Ling Han was instantly tossed flying. The danger of death enshrouded him. He had a feeling that it was useless even if he could use rising from the ashes. This wild storm of energy would extinguish the flames of his revival in the next instant, and strike him completely into death and the underworld. Because this was the move of a celestial king, an existence that was above all others. He hurriedly used the mystical power of time of the Black Tower, boosting himself so that his own time could be sped up by 10,000 times, winning him the time to save himself. But even so, the wild storm of energy that was madly rushing towards him was still overwhelmingly fast. He hurriedly used the power of the 5-element source powers, forming a defensive shield in front of him. However, this was really only capable of mounting slight resistance. The protective wall immediately crumbled. In front of this storm of energy, it was not capable of even lasting a single blow. However, this had also finally garnered a sliver of time for him. Ling Han had completely finished the thought, and Xiao, his entire person immediately disappeared without a trace. He had entered the Black Tower. Boom! In the outside world, wild waves of energy surged madly, spilling out in a completely unbridled manner. Even lower-level celestial kings would be terrified at this. No, no, no. Even if a 9th heaven celestial king was here, he would still frown slightly. That was because both sides were too strong, both being overlord existences even among 9th heaven celestial kings. The Imperial Empress of 4 Seas Palace, Shang Jiwei. The Grand Elder of the Rock Palace, Long Yueshi. After the attack, Shang Jiwei had already appeared. She had a tall, slender build, and wore white imperial robes. Her glossy hair was piled on the top of her head, appearing poised and noble. And she was also a rare beauty. Compared to the Empress and Hunyo, she was only slightly inferior in beauty, but added with the domineering air she possessed as a 9th heaven celestial king, she definitely was in no way inferior to the two women. Long Yueshi, come out here to meet your death, she demanded coldly. Long Yueshi paid her no regard at all, and merely calmly stated, retreat. Coward. Shang Jiwei humphed. The other party had already avoided battle for a good many years, and Shang Jiwei had already gotten used to it as well. It could not be helped. The other woman had sustained a Dao injury, and being able to live for so many years was already a very good fortune. If Long Yueshi went all out in battle, it was highly possible that the battle would be her last. That's not right. She was just about to wave her hand to signal for her troops to retreat as well when her eyes suddenly shone brightly, and swept a glance at the spot Ling Han had vanished. Long Yueshi, you almost had me fooled. Previously, though you have also avoided battle and hidden, you would not retreat as easily as this without a verbal battle at least. What are you trying to hide? Chapter 2130, Love Triangle. Shang Jiwei's eyes swept over the spot. There was nothing in this world that could be hidden in front of her. A ninth heaven celestial king, from a certain aspect, was the manifestation of the regulations of heaven and earth, and could see through the essence of the heaven and earth. Her eyes focused on a single point, the expression on her face suddenly becoming excited. In fact, even her hands were trembling. Shua, right at this moment, a large hand suddenly stretched out, directly scooped up that area, and then rapidly retreated into the depths of the mountains. If Shang Jiwei had not been so excited that her mind had suddenly gone blank, there would have been absolutely no possibility that this large hand could have succeeded so easily. But now, it had caught her completely off guard. Long, you, she. Shang Jiwei flew into a thunderous rage abruptly, all her black locks raised skywards. Boom, 9 seals appeared on her body, each seal exuding a might that domineered the world. She was extraordinarily furious, as if she had become a demon. Her figure suddenly shot out as she set off in pursuit of the large hand. Pung! However, she had only pursued it for over 1,000 miles when a shield of light blocked her from advancing further. Even if she was a ninth heaven celestial king, so what? She had still stumbled back from the impact of her crash. He is Yuan Sheng's heir. Shang Jiwei roared in fury. Long Yueshi, give him back to me. Give back your head. The old woman's, Long Yueshi's, aged voice rang out. Shang Jiwei, you have already lost in the past, so what is the point of you so earnestly struggling now? Now, both Yi Yun and Yuan Sheng have long since died, so what else can you not let go of? Without destroying the rock palace, I will not be able to let it go. Shang Jiwei declared harshly. As long as you and the brand of that B*TCH are still alive, I will definitely not give up. Attention to all members of the rock palace. She suddenly calmed down, her expression frighteningly cold. Whoever unlocks the formation for me, and allows me entry, I can appoint her as the Vice-Imperial Empress of the Four Seas Palace. Additionally, I only want the lives of 2 people. One is Long Yueshi, and the second is Tianyun. As long as the others do not resist, I can leave you alone. In fact, it is also possible for you to join the Four Seas Palace. After these words were out, a wave of commotion swept through both the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace. Previously, Shang Jiwei had clearly shown that she wanted to slaughter every single member of the Rock Palace. Surrender? She did not accept it. As long as they bore the name of the Rock Palace, she would kill all of them. Yet now, a complete reversal of her attitude had actually taken place. She only wanted the lives of Long Yueshi and Hunyo. This was practically. She had gone mad. But when a ninth heaven celestial king made a promise in public, it was like the heavens were speaking. They would live up to their word, or they would be abandoned by the Tao of heaven and earth, their battle prowess dropping greatly. Which also meant that this promise from Shang Jiwei was absolutely true. Why? The only thing that had changed was that she had suddenly discovered Ling Han's identity. He was the heir of some guy called Yuan Sheng. What relationship did she have with this Yuan Sheng? At this moment, the people of both palaces were both stunned and curious. This was the gossip of of 3 ninth heaven celestial kings. In your dreams. Long Yueshi declared coldly. Don't forget. This great protective formation has been personally laid down by Yuan Sheng. Even after millions and millions of epochs, it would still exist for eternity, protecting our rock palace. He. Shang Jiwei did not answer, and merely responded with a cold smirk. She had completely gotten her emotions back under control. With a flick of her sleeves, she turned and left. In the rock heaven, Long Yueshi's aged face showed a solemn expression. Previously, Shang Jiwei had been extremely patient, wanting to slowly dry up the source of power of the rock heaven, and sever the rock palace's foundations. Then, even if they had a supreme protective formation sheltering, the rock palace would still become a pool of stagnant water, deteriorating from the inside out. But now that she had found out who Ling Han was, her patience had also instantly disappeared completely. Sigh, why had Ling Han come now with such a coincidental timing? With a flash, Ling Han exited the Black Tower. Ling Han. Hunyo pounced over, and hung on Ling Han like a koala. Ling Han patted the little girl's head, and said, "Where are the others? Are they all right?" "Stupid Ling Han, you only care about other people. You don't care about Nyo." Hunyo complained, biting Ling Han's neck. "The others are perfectly fine," Long Yueshi continued, and then shook her head. "Sigh, what an ill-fated relationship. Senior, exactly what is behind all this?" Ling Han asked. Though he was inside the Black Tower, he had still heard the exchange between Shang Jiwei and Long Yueshi. It seemed that the feud between the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace was not because of contesting over territory, but had rather originated from a romantic conflict. Long Yueshi sighed a few times again, and then said, "All right then. Since you managed to enter the Rock Palace all by yourself, which has proven your strength, as well as proven your good fortune, I will tell you. In the past, Shang Jiwei, Tianyun, and Yuan Sheng had both fought alongside each other, grown together, and were very close with one another. Tianyun is the last imperial empress of the Rock Heaven, and she is also Yi Yun." "It's Hunyo." Hunyo interrupted her in irritation. She had never accepted the name of Yi Yun. Long Yueshi smiled, and then said, "Hunyo's body contains the martial brand that was left behind by Tianyun. She will be able to inherit Tianyun's martial foundations in the future. Perhaps she may even be able to exceed Tianyun's limits, and step onto a completely new height." "Heavenly Venerable Tier," Ling Han continued. Long Yueshi nodded. "Yuan Sheng is the master that you have never met, but you have cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and thus you are his true disciple. Yuan Sheng is supremely talented, and was the strongest prodigy of that era. Both Shang Jiwei and Tianyun fell in love with Yuan Sheng, and Yuan Sheng ultimately chose Tianyun, causing Shang Jiwei to feel resentment. Not only did she become enemies with Tianyun, she has also attacked Tianyun repeatedly. However, Yuan Sheng ultimately successfully became a heavenly venerate, and no matter what Shang Jiwei tried, it would only be wasted effort. For the sake of their previous relations, Yuan Sheng didn't do anything to Shang Jiwei either. However, following Yuan Sheng's death, Shang Jiwei also became very extremist, and thought that it was Tianyun who had caused Yuan Sheng's death. She suddenly delivered a fatal strike when Tianyun had sustained injuries in the resistance against the storm of darkness and returned, ultimately leading to Tianyun's death. She also wanted to destroy the Rock Palace, but thankfully, with the powerful formation laid down by Yuan Sheng, she was not able to take one step over the boundaries. I, too, have sustained fatal Dao injuries in the resistance against the force of darkness, but for the sake of the juniors of this palace, I can only struggle and keep holding on. When Yi Hunyo matures, I will then be able to leave with an easy heart." As it turned out, it was a love triangle. Love had turned to hatred, and caused very good sisters to turn hostile against one another and become enemies. It was a little cliché. A great and noble ninth heaven celestial king had actually died because of this. It was a little wasted. "Senior, how did Senior Yuan Sheng die?" Ling Han asked. "That was a heavenly venerate, already superior over heavenly Dao itself, so why had he still died? I am not very sure about that myself, but it involves 3 supreme existences. Their names cannot be spoken of," Long Yueshi said solemnly. Even if she was a ninth heaven celestial king, she still showed an expression of reverence and fear. Heavenly venerate. Could it be that it was the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and the other great supreme elites that had joined forces to kill the karmic life Heavenly Venerable? But why? There was clearly an invasion of the storm of darkness, so they should have been united instead. If it was claimed that the 3 great heavenly venerates had turned traitor, that would be even more impossible. Now, it was just the 3 of them that were heavenly venerates. Wasn't opening the 2-realm passageway, and allowing the people of the foreign realm to march straight in unchallenged an incredibly simple matter? Who could stop them? Ling Han realized that though he knew more of the truth, it was practically of little help in solving the mystery. Chapter 2131, Breaking Through to Earth's Soul. No wonder Shang Jiwei had suddenly gone mad. It was because she had discovered the heir of her old love. More importantly, this heir of her old love was actually running towards the Rock Palace. This naturally made her want even more to raze the Rock Palace to the ground. What gave them the right? She was no match for Tianyun, and now, even in the next generation, she could not win over Tianyun's reincarnation. Go and rest first. Long Yueshi waved a hand, a sliver of weariness seeping from her gaze. She had already struggled wearily for countless years, and this time, Shang Jiwei had changed her mind. It was highly possible that it would really shake the Rock Palace's foundations. In the past, they could only gather together, and endure the tribulations together. That was because all of them would share the same fate of death if the Rock Palace were to be conquered. But now? This compromise from Shang Jiwei immediately caused a great many people to lose the motivation to fight hard. If Long Yueshi was in a good condition, or Hunyo matured and reached 7th heaven or 8th heaven celestial king tier, then everyone would still have the confidence to hold on. However, Long Yueshi was already at the end of her line, and Hunyo was still who knew how many years away from the celestial king tier. How were they supposed to hold on during such days when there were practically no future prospects that could be seen? Moreover, Shang Jiwei had even promised that whoever unlocked the great formation of the Rock Palace would be appointed as the Vice-Imperial Empress of the Four Seas Palace. This naturally was a massive temptation. There was pressure as well as temptation. It was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be any traitors. Thus, Long Yueshi had to keep a closer watch. Otherwise, if they lost the protection of the heavenly venerable tier great formation, Shang Jiwei would be able to penetrate straight into their heart. With her present battered body, Long Yueshi was definitely no match for Shang Jiwei. Ling Han, come play. Hunyo was simple-minded. Even if the mountain entrance was under siege, she was still casual and careless, completely unconcerned about it. Ling Han pulled her hand, and asked, "Where are my parents?" "Oh, they are in a small town 10,000 miles away from here," Hunyo answered casually. Are they all right?" Ling Han was slightly nervous. After all, 10,000 years had already passed. If his parents had not raised their cultivation level, they would have long since died of old age. "They're fine," Hunyo replied with a smile. "They are both in the Genesis tier already." She blinked at Ling Han. Immediately, Ling Han understood. This little girl had given a lot of special attention to his parents. Otherwise, with the aptitude of his parents, it should not have been possible for them to advance to the Genesis tier, especially in as short a period of time as 10,000 years. He gave Hunyo a thumbs up as a symbol of encouragement. Hunyo was immediately pleased with herself, gladly accepting Ling Han's praise. "What about Wan Xing and the others?" Ling Han asked further. Hunyo immediately blinked her eyes, looking shifty. Ling Han sighed, and asked, "What have you done again?" "Hee hee." Hunyo laughed guiltily. As expected, Hunyo was still a jealous and petty lover. The moment Lu Herong had brought them back to the Rock Heaven, she had imprisoned the Empress, bewitching Maiden Ro, and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Thus, she was naturally guilty now that Ling Han was asking about them. "You mischievous little girl." Ling Han was speechless. Reluctantly, she released the Empress and the others. Hunyo almost came to blows with the Empress. Thankfully, Ling Han was there to play mediator, and taught Hunyo a good lesson. Only then was the dispute finally concluded. Ling Han looked at the Empress and Hunyo. This made him think of the love triangle between Yuan Sheng, Tianyun, and Shang Jiwei. If he did not deal with matters appropriately, perhaps the circumstances in the future would also evolve to that situation. He wanted to see his parents, but because they were under siege from the troops of the Four Seas Palace, no one could enter or exit, so how was he supposed to leave? Fortunately, the Rock Heaven was an ancient great sect, and was incredibly wealthy. There was a severing mundane tier mystery realm in the mountains of the Rock Heaven, and there was also a Yang Soul Ocean, Yin Soul Valley, Earth Soul Mountain, and Heaven Soul Pool. You wanted to break through to the Immortal Palace tier? There was also an Immortal Palace tier mystery realm here, so it was absolutely no problem. Ascending to Celestial King tier was the only exception. In that case, you could only walk the celestial path. Since they could not leave for the moment, Ling Han thus decided to first break through to Earth Soul. He had already attained the conditions for breaking through. However, the Rock Palace did not have the custom of accepting male disciples. In fact, they did not even welcome males to stay temporarily here, but Ling Han could not leave. Thus, whenever he walked out, he would be the target of peculiar looks from the disciples of the Rock Palace. Hun Yo, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro had all broken through before him. Not only had they broken through to Earth Soul, they had even already crossed over to the threshold of Heaven Soul. Ling Han then gave the heavenly sun black gold and purple spirit flames to the two women, allowing them to pick first, and then collect it for their own. Whether they could or not would be up to the two women's own good fortune. The Empress chose the heavenly sun black gold, while Hun Yo chose the purple spirit flames. They entered into the Black Tower, and communicated with these two source powers of heaven and earth. With the time acceleration effects of 1,000-fold, they could take it slow and easy. Meanwhile, Ling Han headed towards the Earth Soul Mountain. At first, the Earth Soul Mountain did not belong to the Rock Palace, but the Source Beast Rock used its mighty strength to move the whole mountain here. From then onwards, the disciples of the Rock Palace would be able to advance to Earth Soul without taking a step outside. The real Earth Soul Mountain pierced straight into the clouds, hundreds of thousands of meters tall, but the rock was an expert of regulations of space. With it using a mighty technique to make some adjustments, the Earth Soul Mountain had been perfectly assimilated into the mountains when looking from the outside. Only when one set foot on it would one realize that this mountain was far higher than it looked. Ling Han arrived at the foot of the mountain. He raised his head and glanced upwards, and then began his ascent. All 4 levels of the dividing soul tier would need a specific item to become the container for a divided soul. However, a freak like Ling Han could use the source powers of heaven and earth to condense his 5th divided soul and so on. In that case, there was no need for so much trouble. There was no container or mystery realm like that in this world either. The container for the Earth Soul tier, Truffle Crystal, was only produced on Earth Soul Mountain, and once it left the mountain, it would disappear. This was a restriction of heaven and earth, and no one could keep it in abundance. Of course, there were good and bad truffle crystals. This was mainly reflected in their height. The higher the altitude, the higher the quality of a discovered truffle crystal would be. Thus, Ling Han did not stop at all as he climbed towards the summit. This mountain repelled all cultivators above Yin Soul, and those below Celestial King tier could not enter. If a Celestial King were to forcibly barge in, this mystery realm would be burst and destroyed, being completely unable to sustain the great might of a Celestial King. Thus, even if you asked for someone else's help in the matter of retrieving truffle crystals, they could only be Yin souls as well. Ling Han climbed the mountain as if he was walking on flat ground. Every 30,000 meters or so, he would encounter a barrier. It was formed by the mystical power of heaven and earth and manifested in human form. It guarded the passage, and he could only continue his advance after defeating it. The Source Beast Rock had not just simply moved this mystery realm here, but had used supreme methods to make slight adjustments so that the difficulty level of each stage had been considerably weakened. Yet Ling Han was unconcerned. With a single punch from him, he instantly resolved all his battles. He had already been capable of matching a heaven soul long when he had been a young soul. When the great clash of source powers exploded, it could even pose a threat to heaven soul monarch tiers. This kind of battle prowess was naturally incredibly terrifying. Hence, could a Yin soul level barrier be capable of becoming a dilemma for him? At the last 30,000 meter barrier, the human-shaped monster that was on guard had finally attained the standard of an Earth Soul Monarch tier, but Ling Han still managed to defeat it easily. He arrived at the summit. There were truffle crystals that were the size of a human head here, and it was also the best quality. Ling Han took one, and with a thought, the fiery flame lightning strike would immediately surged out of his dantian, entering into the truffle crystal. From the outside, there was a sapling spreading out its slender branches inside the translucent crystal, and there were vague flickers of flames and lightning. Chapter 2132, Formation Breaks. Ling Han began breaking through to Earth Soul. Over the last 10,000 years, he had been focused on studying the 5-element source powers, and under the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, that time had been further extended to 10 million years. In this process, he naturally gained a very deep, profound understanding of the essence of the Tao of heaven and earth. Those were source powers of heaven and earth. It was very rare for even celestial kings to gain even one, so they were naturally wondrous. The cultivation level barrier was very soon broken through. This was only a minor level. For a prodigy like Ling Han, it was naturally unable to cause any kind of difficulty. Long tribulation clouds began gathering densely in the skies, and the heavenly tribulation came as promised. At first, Ling Han wanted to use the heavenly tribulation to break free of the siege by the Four Seas Palace so he could go and visit his parents, Helian Xuanxue, and the others. With the boost of heavenly tribulation, who would dare stop him? But upon further thought, he dismissed this idea. The heavenly tribulation would only last half a day. They only had to follow him, and make their move after the heavenly tribulation dispersed. By then, what could he do? Under tempering from the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han's physique gained a certain amount of improvement. However, there was not much use now with just the heavenly tribulation alone. Ling Han would have to further exploit the profound secrets of the indestructible heaven scroll. He endured this heavenly tribulation very easily. Half a day later, he packed up and returned. However, a storm was brewing inside the Rock Palace, and the core of the problem was him. The Rock Palace did not accept make disciples, nor did they entertain male guests. Having Ling Han here was clearly unjustified. Thus, a seventh heaven elder raised a suggestion, discussing the matter of expelling Ling Han from the Rock Palace. What? When Ling Han found out, he appeared incredibly stunned. Things had already come so far, and some old women were actually still in the mood to discuss this problem. Had their brains been kicked by a donkey? However, his cultivation level was low, and he had no status, so no one would be concerned about his opinion. Not many people knew that Ling Han was actually the heir of a heavenly venerate, just like not many people knew that Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable was actually the bestowed title of a heavenly venerate, and that was the same for Yuan Sheng. Otherwise, the heir of a heavenly venerate was still very scary, though the karmic life heavenly venerable had long since passed away. In the end, it was Long Yueshi who had stepped out, and said that extreme times called for extreme measures, suppressing all disagreements. As Ling Han saw it, this was definitely not a disturbance that was only directed at him. A group of celestial kings were discussing the going or staying of a dividing soul tier behind closed doors. You got to be kidding. Even if they were presently trapped inside the Rock Palace, they were not as bored as that. There were traitors within the Rock Palace. Ling Han had long since guessed this when they had been ambushed on the sea, and now with such an event happening, he definitely did not believe that it was a mere accident or coincidence. However, Ling Han could not do much. Long Yueshi should have long since deduced that there was a traitor in the palace. If she had not done anything to stay on guard, she would not have deserved to be a ninth heaven celestial king. Ling Han also came to know that there was no eighth heaven celestial king in the Rock Heaven. Thus, beneath Long Yueshi, there were two seventh heaven celestial kings that had the highest authority. Long Yueshi could die at any moment. These two seventh heaven celestial kings were responsible for the duty of assisting, guiding, and protecting Hunyo. They were also figures that possessed considerable power within the rock palace. These two celestial kings were Elder Fuyun and Elder Sanha. Elder Fuyun was the more radical of the two, and had a very strong thirst for power, while Elder Sanha was completely focused on cultivation, and belonged to the type that was more unconcerned. This time, it was Elder Fuyun that had brought up the matter of Ling Han's expulsion from the rock palace. As a great seventh heaven celestial king, how could she bring herself to do it? There was something off with this old woman. Ling Han immediately concluded so internally, but the other party had high status and great power, so how could she be displaced merely with a few words from him? Of course, Hunyo would definitely listen to him, but would the other people listen to Hunyo? Hong, long, long, he felt a resounding boom sound in his ears, as if the heaven and earth had crumbled. What's going on? How dare you? Long Yueshi's voice rang out, filled with fury. Ha ha ha, Fuyun Celestial King, well done. Shang Jiwei's voice sounded as well. From today onwards, you will be the Vice-Imperial Empress of our Four Seas Palace. Instantly, Ling Han's heart jolted. He had just been thinking that there was something off with this old woman, but he had not thought that something would happen so fast. The Great Mountain Protective Formation had been opened. Multiple battleships were seen appearing in the skies, casting dark shadows, just like casting a shadow on the hearts of the members of the Rock Palace. Why has the Great Mountain Protective Formation been unlocked? Could it be that it was Elder Fuyun? Nonsense, didn't you hear Shang Jiwei's words? I say, the Four Seas Palace only wants Yun and the Grand Elder, so why should we put our lives on the line? Why don't we just surrender to the Four Seas Palace? That's right, even if we don't side with the Four Seas Palace, we can completely leave without any reservations. Why should we cling to a rock that is destined to sink like the Rock Palace and die alongside it? Everyone was conversing spiritedly. Some were incredibly stunned, while there were others that were advising people to surrender. Ling Han heard all this, and finally understood that the meeting previously was only a pretense. Its purpose was to allow those that wished to surrender to have an exchange of words, to achieve some kind of agreement. And now, as Fuyun Celestial King had unlocked the Great Mountain Protective Formation, the others became lobbyists, speeding up the destruction of the Rock Palace. Long Yueshi, today will be the day of your death. Shang Jiwei's figure appeared, standing proudly in the air, but her exquisitely beautiful figure was exuding an air of supreme dominance, like an ultimate empress. It is only a battle. Long Yueshi appeared, similarly standing proudly in the air. She wielded a purple walking cane in her right hand. Though she looked aged and decrepit, the aura she exuded was no weaker than Shang Jiwei's. It is not determined yet who will live or die. You are already at the end of your line, and you still dare speak tough. Shang Jiwei said disdainfully. Now that the heavenly venerable tier great formation had been opened, the Rock Palace was only a piece of cake in her eyes. The others may be spared as long as you put down your weapons. The reincarnation of Tianyun must be captured, and this person. She extended a finger and tapped at the empty air, showing Ling Han's image. This boy must not be harmed. Whoever touches a hair on his head, I will consign you to eternal damnation. Everyone was immediately stunned. Wasn't this the person who had fled into the Rock Palace not too long ago? Why had he now gotten a connection with Shang Jiwei? She actually said that not a single hair on his head was to be touched. Could it be that this was her illegitimate son? Though they were shocked, the members of the Four Seas Palace, at least, had to abide by her word strictly. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. The members of the Four Seas Palace all shouted. If they could win the battle without fighting, they naturally would not wish to risk their lives in battle. After all, there were not many battle maniacs like Ling Han. Most people cultivated because they desired status, power, and wealth. Meanwhile, the members of the Rock Palace were at a loss. So should they fight or not? The Great Mountain Protective Formation that was like a great wall had already been conquered, and the Grand Elder was definitely no match for Shang Jiwei, either otherwise they would not have stuck to a defensive strategy, being beaten on by their enemies all this while. Then, if the result was destined to be their defeat, what would be the point of further battle? Those that had long since borne the intent of betrayal immediately threw down their weapons. Now that they had started, a great many people who were indecisive immediately followed their lead, and put down their weapons. There was less than 1/10 of people that were willing to be loyal to the Rock Palace to the death. Long Yueshi couldn't help but sigh. Though she had stayed on guard against any betrayal in the ranks, she had never thought that it would be someone like Celestial King Fuyun. This was the strongest person next to herself, and she had also placed high hopes on the latter. When she died, the Rock Palace would be temporarily delegated under her leadership. She raised her voice, and announced, "All disciples, put down your weapons. From this day onwards, the Rock Palace is disbanded." This was cutting their losses. As long as Hunyo could grow to become a 9th heaven celestial king in the future, then the Rock Palace would be able to rise up again one day. Otherwise, there was no need for unnecessary sacrifice. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.